Our next submitter isn't in the paper order of speakers to be heard, and there was an administrative error there on our part, but is on page 1269 of board books. Learning Differences Aotearoa, and Chris and Lisa, welcome along.
Thank you.
We've got 10 minutes. We do ring a bell at 5. That's not the Graham Norton chair signal. It's really just a reminder of where you are through the process. If you go to 10, that's fine. It's just we won't have time to ask any questions. But really, thank you for this the submission, and really the floor is yours now. Thanks.
Thank you. So that's okay there? Yeah. So thank you very much for this opportunity. I'm here representing the Trust, and Lisa is the chair of our Trust. We run a variety of programs to support people, children to adults with learning differences in Southland. And just to let you know that what we do in Southland is actually not done anywhere else in New Zealand. So what I was wanting to talk about, we agree with the food options for the urban play space and the Southland Museum and Art Gallery. But what we're wanting to look at is like it's adding value to those projects by including neurodiversity, the options to support our neurodiversity community. So that is increasing accessibility so that they can use these spaces. So where before you were listening to CCS talk about those with disabilities, with neurodiversity, some people do call them disabilities, and the Human Rights Commission, it's given that it comes under that word disability. We don't see it that way, but what they do talk about is that it's hidden. So it's not noticed to the same extent. So that's why I'm here today, to increase your awareness about it. So how we'd like to achieve this, including our neurodiversity in the planning and implementation of these projects, is having a voice representing that community, that person who has lived experience, and also has the ability to coordinate with all the groups in Southland to bring together the neurodiversity voice and be involved in planning and implementing the space so that we have increased accessibility for all of our community. So just to explain what neurodiversity is, it's a fairly new term that's getting a lot of recognition in corporate and education sectors. It is a term that just means people think and process information in a different way. That's all it means. And under that big umbrella term of neurodiversity, there's you can have people dyslexics, you can have people with dyspraxia, you can have ADHD, or you can have autism. So the neurodiversity covers all that whole umbrella. Now, the reason that it's important to know about the neurodiversity community is because research shows that up to 20% of our community has a neurodiversity. So if we're sitting in this room here, at least 6 people would have a neurodiverse way of thinking, and I'm one of them. So yeah. So I think it's what it means, though, for our neurodiverse community is if we're in a place where there's a lot of written material that's giving instruction, it's really hard to engage with that, the written material. So it's how do we change that information so it becomes accessible to everyone, and it also for those with low literacy skills. So it might be also that providing within a play space different types, so there's, a person can play on their own or in a group, and that's catering to everyone. So it's all about inclusion as well. And it also could mean that someone who's challenged with coordination, that if we have specialised equipment, that they can play on that equipment. And it's like in the museum, if we've got exhibitions, it's having how the information is presented about the exhibitions is done in a way that will be accessible and not text heavy. So those are some of the ideas that can be done. They don't have to be big major things, but small things can make a difference. So just to let you know, with the work that we do down here, Southland has got a lot of expertise around neurodiversity compared to the rest of New Zealand, and also thinking about how the work that we've done down here comes from, how Southland has this innovative spirit that we always embrace, whether it's our isolation or whatever it is. And this is similar. It's like, can we take the initiative to have in our planning and future-proofing what we do, catering for our neurodiverse community. So that's up to 20,000 people in Southland, 20% of the population. So that's a big chunk of our community that we need to be supporting and, increasing accessibility. So it's just going forward, keeping in mind all aspects of our community so that they're included, and using the expertise that we have down here to really make the future-proof what we want to do. And I just wanted to show you something that we did over COVID because our community wasn't accessing the information, the very good information that was coming out of Wells South. So this is just information that came out about staying mentally healthy, and we converted it to this so it was accessible. And it doesn't take much to make it easier to access. Okay, so thank you.
Thanks, Chris. So picking up on your message and wanting to have these issues taken into consideration through the city centre master plan and the play space, wouldn't it be better if we just incorporated it into all our signage?
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Bearing in mind your outdoor play spaces, swimming pools, council facilities.
Absolutely. I mean, you imagine if we became like a neurodiversity, friendly city, just like that, with the signage. And I mean, that's what COVID showed us, is that to access information, we have to do it in different ways. We have to be, inclusive and realise that people do process it in different ways. So it's just celebrating and, incorporating that in any of our design. Yep.
Would it be fair to say it's not just incorporating those who have various forms of neurodiversity, but also what some might call the modern attention span?
Yeah, true.
And that, documents seem to be scanned very quickly without seeking the detail, whereas if the detail is more simply placed there, that it becomes easier for people to understand?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, like, this here is done in a learning difference friendly way, but everyone can access it easier. So what you can do to support anyone who with neurodiversity is going to benefit everyone. Yeah.
And can I just follow up on a point that you started with? This isn't happening anywhere else in New Zealand? No,
I can't find it. That anyone is looking at future planning with neurodiversity. It's not really in the, in the infrastructure. It's in corporate. They're starting to talk about it in corporate structure, in workplace, and in the education sector, but not that I can find in this sector.
Thank you. Councillors, open for questions. None. That's what happens when you explain things simply.
Oh, gosh.
Look, it's a really interesting point that we've obviously never had presented to us before. So thank you for, first of all, your written submission, and again, our apologies for not picking up on the fact that you wanted to speak to it, but thanks for coming along this afternoon.
Thank you very much.
Jeanette, would you like to pop on up? Welcome, Jeanette. Again, it's not an unfamiliar process for you, so you've got 10 minutes.
Still more of you than there are of us.
Yeah, but you've got a safety barrier and you can sit down these days.
That's true. Good afternoon, everybody, and your worship, councillors. Thank you for the opportunity to talk to our submission. I'm Jeanette Malcolm. This is Jessie Hall and another member of our trust, Lyndall Ludlow, is in the back there somewhere. So as council knows, we're the team for Project Saving Grace, which is proposing the conversion of a disused building in South Invercargill, the old Grace Street Chapel to be exact, into a community space which will promote resilience, connection and well-being within the city. It would be a multi-use and highly flexible space located alongside South Alive and the pantry. And if you consider the floor plan that's attached to our submission, you'll note both the size and the number of spaces that could be provided. We've developed a comprehensive feasibility study which points to a strong need for a dedicated space for youth, the arts, physical activity and events, as well as a hosted community lounge. And the feasibility involved people like Mana from Evolve Gym at the Blues Club, who's run out of space, Mikkel from Zumba, who asked for an update recently and wrote in reply, "It's such a great project, and I know there is a huge need for it. I would be moving all of my daytime classes right away." Special needs people who have had their day centres closed, Grey Power so they could go to where the majority of their members are, Red Cross refugee program to enable community connections for former refugees, and the arts who need studio and class spaces, and youth. The fact that they have nowhere now should be enough said. We got strong support from them and from the organisations that work with youth. And in terms of geography, the use of the space would of course be open to everyone. And we know from the South Alive and Pantry experience, its location won't be a deterrent for those in other parts of the city. But in this location, what it would do is give people living in the South the opportunity to have facilities they can actually access. We believe there's a strong alignment with Council's criteria for supporting projects, namely that the project supports the well-being of all the community and the four well-beings. So it would enable Council to meet its local government act obligations in a community which is 35% of Invercargill's population, but which, due to 85% of that population living in high levels of deprivation on a national standard, cannot easily access many of the Council's other projects. There's a demonstrated need for the project, and a couple of other points. It would also contribute to Council's play strategy in providing a large covered space for that. And it could provide a unique tailored support system for transitioning workers when TY closes. We've had good and positive discussions with the funding trusts from ILT and the ILT Foundation, with several on-site visits, including from the chair, and engagement and visits from the Southern Trust CEO, from Dunedin, and Community Trust South, and the Lottery Community Facilities Fund. But the fact remains that it's more likely to proceed if there's some form of council participation. So what is our request to council? At our last appearance in February, we asked that council buy and own the building, probably using endowment funds, at an amount approximately equal to 0.5% of what is being spent in the CBD. This is a different proposal in that our trust could now own the building itself, and council could participate in another way. We haven't been specific in terms of a dollar amount in our submission because we understand the severe limitations council has, but we are requesting that the project be added to the LTP in a way that allows for funding discussions and in-kind initiatives to be considered, and that council agrees to work alongside the funding trusts and IC2, that's us, to further investigate the options for how it could work in partnership and help to fund the project. And so in closing, we aren't just proposing a building with a collection of spaces available to groups that don't have any or don't have enough now. We aren't just proposing a building that will enable and facilitate community connections to build better resilience and mental well-being. It's all of that, but it's more. We will do our utmost through private partnerships and expert assistance, and through working with South Invercargill on our trust and in our advisory groups to make sure it's also exciting and somewhere that the local community find inspiring and that they're proud of. And that will be a great thing for all of Invercargill. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeanette. You talked about private partnerships just towards the end there. Have there been any expressions of interest of those?
Well, we've been talking with Vodafone quite a lot, of course, because as council knows, they are coming here for 3 to 6 years, and they expressed strong interest, but but they haven't, they obviously want to take things in order. They want to do their research before they make any commitments, and that's now being pushed back a bit. And there are other, certainly other ideas and offers, to put us in touch with people, but don't really want to go public on that just yet, Mr. Chair.
Fair enough. Councillors, it's open to questions from you. Councillor Amundsen.
Thanks. Two questions, I guess. The first one is around why is this being done kind of separate, I guess, to South Alive? And the second question is, in other communities around New Zealand, which are, similar in terms of deprivation to South City, do you know of any places that have centres like this or some kind of community facility like this, and the impact that that's had on those communities?
In relation to South Alive, they were part of the the research for the need and the analysis of that need when we were doing the feasibility. In fact, at South Invercargill, because we had Jan Ormsby as well, and in fact your own Tony Biddle as well, were in fact the majority. So, so they strongly support the need for the project. Their issue was twofold. One was that they feel that, and I agree with them, that a project like this needs a huge amount of focus and resource, and they simply don't have that in order to get it over the line. But the full intention is that they would run it, or they'd run the booking, or that they would be running at the very least a partnership. And so, and their other concern was with the building itself. But as you'll know from the feasibility study, we have had a full engineering report, and we've had the design fix from Kensington Engineers, and it's been costed into by the quantity surveyor. So we don't have, as it turned out, those concerns about the building were fairly easily fixed in terms of bringing it up to 67% of the building code. In terms of other centres around New Zealand, we looked into a few in terms of design. We haven't looked into them in terms of what impact did they have on the community. Not aware of any studies that have been done. There's been a lot of research in Australia, which we've certainly looked at in terms of what creates community resilience and mental health, and that is just the sort of centre that we're proposing. But to my knowledge, there isn't that same research. In fact, we were talking initially with Steve Gibbling, who was aware of some researchers in Christchurch, that this could be a model for looking into that, the before and the after.
Councillor Lush.
You make a very compelling argument, and it's a fantastic proposal to spend some money and revitalise that community. If you extend that, do you think there would be advantages to make that area a focus for the new museum and the new art gallery? Is that the right place to put it, giving connectivity and all those concepts you've brought up there?
I don't think there's any spaces there, but I guess you've already got. I mean, if we were starting from, from a clean sheet grassroots, maybe, but the thing is that you've already got the museum in its location, so it probably wouldn't make any sense, I guess, to consider moving that. What was the other one? The museum and what? Sorry, the art gallery. I'm sure it'd be a great idea, Councillor Lush, but I mean, they've got to go somewhere. I suppose, like the stadium is where it is, Rugby Park's where it is, Splash Palace is where it is. Can't really answer beyond that.
Okay.
Sorry.
Thanks for thinking.
Thanks. Councillor Clark.
Yeah, through you, Chair. Jeanette, I raised this when you did the last presentation, so I guess I'll just raise it again. You sort of answered it with one of the previous questions about whether you've got some information from other sites, and I know the Chair's going to tell me this needs to be a question, but there are other community hubs, especially in the North Island and high deprivation areas, and I think it would be helpful if you could access them to see how they're set up and how they're funded and what outcomes they've got. I think it would really enhance your case to do that. So if you could do that, I think that would be really helpful.
I think that's an excellent idea. To date, of course, apart from a small grant that paid for the engineer, this has been a volunteer
Sure.
project of a huge number of hours over a year. So we've been a bit limited, really, in that. But going forward and before anything starts, and indeed the very next step, I think we wanted to do this first, so council wasn't surprised, but is to call a proper public meeting. There's been a lot of public input, 92 youth and 25 organisations, but really, in the way we did South Alive, the next step is to call a full-on public meeting. So, and then see who wants to be involved in an ongoing way as parts of various groups. And so, one of those could be a research group.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your submission. Thank you both
Council.
for taking the time to come along and speak to it and answer our questions. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Mr. Hodgkinson. Again, sir, you're not unfamiliar with our process. We've got 10 minutes. Take a seat. The clock's ticking.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity, Mayor, councillors. Apologise for this. I'm waiting for some dentures, so there we go.
Can you
If you could just make sure that microphone was up close.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
My interest is, as it always is trying to encourage the different territorial authorities, the District Council, yourselves and Environment Southland to, in your long-term planning and these 10-year plans, I realise that there are evolve and they're a work in project that always gets updated there. But given the transitional times and uncertain times that we're facing, I feel that we should be giving far more attention to making this city and our province fit for purpose for the new green economies and circular economies that, whether you're progressive in nature or last cab off the rank, we're all going to end up there to have to respond to this climate challenge that we've got the small window of opportunity to address. Now, I notice in there's a reference just in passing, hardly more than that, maybe there's more detail there about dealing with climate change. But as we've all learnt, this is affecting us just like this worldwide pandemic, and we've got to get out in front of that. And a 10-year plan shouldn't be looking at just the important day-to-day issues or establishment of infrastructure or capital expenditure for now. We've got to look forward and plan progressively where we want to be. What sort of city, its appearances, what is it going to look in 20 or 50 years' time? It's not like a 3-year time frame that politicians normally work to for politicking purposes. You have got a mandate and an obligation, as the other territorial authorities here, to look at that and actually plan ahead. And I find the references here very light and vague to like having to counter any increased flooding risk or implications for drainage or levels there. But we've actually got to try and make sure that we're fit for purpose and try to lead the pack, because there's a whole lot of marketing advantages in looking for a green economy. So I'm suggesting that not only the city and this province there, we start to look at seeing how we can reposition ourselves, and also if we adopt some of those practices, so that we can have getting a first adopter or first mover advantage there. So I think Southland, in the widest sense, should be try to be driving ecological change and putting that into our communities and into our commercial things there for marketing advantage and also for practical reasons. So as far as Invercargill itself, there, I'll just note the thing there that I put in under that column is pedestrianising the CBD for extended shopping. I know that the business houses are very protective of their parking, but I think that we've got to convince them or make those adjustments so that we can keep them in there. We've got to have far more interconnected undercover connections. We've got a few arcades in there. I think they should be built because of the challenging weather that we have here. If we want people to stay and shop and visitors to spend more time and spend more money. And I think, and I've also been previously looking at developing a laminated wood industry for Otago and South to take advantage of our large quantities of usable timber to add value to it there, so that we can reduce our reliance on these concrete steel structures there, which at end of life, that's their problem. And this also my other interest is advancing the idea of having an industrial vermiculture industry, i.e. to harness the green waste that your council has in its transfer station that's not being utilised. A lot of that material is just being taken and dumped it back over your landfill, which was meant to be closed 20 years ago. So there's a resource that's not being made into compost like a lot of other councils or utilised. So what you can do is take that material and you can combine it as a carbon product with protein, i.e. there's a number of freezing works in New Zealand are disposing large quantities of woolly lamb pelts, sheep pelts currently, quietly, because there's the economies of processing them and trying to market them are not there at the moment. So you've got a protein source available in huge quantities, and you've got your green waste that's not doing anything for your ratepayers there. The other component that could be make vermiculture, i.e. Tiger worms to break that material, which is combined down and then separated out so that you can use that as a feedstock to create more worm eating capabilities, for the lack of a better word, and you get vermicast out of the worms, which is like equivalent, so that we can replace that in industrial scale with superphosphate, NPK, DAP, all those chemically made synthetic fertilisers that are now endangering our waterways. So that's the consequence there is an economic advantage that we can be doing at scale to actually address that, and that model can be used in other provinces. So there's an economic advantage for the council and ratepayers. And also, as far as wider Southland, we should be looking at making themed cycle trail developments off that round the mountain thing, which is effectively not delivered for anybody what was promised. So we've got to theme them, either have circular food maps for people online or printouts so they can cycle or use their camper vans to go around and taste different things, whether it's mutton and Winton, or whether it's venison and Te Anau, or lamb and pork, and utilise our chefing and the ILT involved to actually use that as one way of encouraging slow circulation by people that have got time to indulge in those things, or for educational things. And the other thing at Te Anau, and finally, is that I've already made an initial presentation to a group there a couple of months ago to look at what we could do to have Te Anau as an eco town. So I'm suggesting that we actually have that as an eco resort, that we create a lab there instead of the tourism and farming sectors that have meshed and function very well in that isolated area. We also combine that with researching green practices, i.e. regenerative farming, organic farming, advanced green tourism initiatives, whether it's hydrogen buses through to Milford, and all those components can be done within that triangulation of a set area, and then it can be funded by central government, by all these pots of money that are available currently to support not only Fiordland and tourism through this pandemic, but we could also tie into other sources of streams and use that area as a testing ground, as I say, for all the green practices that we can roll out, flip out to wider Southland and into other provinces in New Zealand and also worldwide. So then you've got another advantage to your main tourist town that you should be well connected to. You've got farming, tourism, and you've got a research capability, which means you'll be hosting people from other countries and other areas on that data that's drawn down from those areas there, and you can actually have that as an income source to fill your hotels in Te Anau and your motels for conferences and the like. That is, thank you for that. But what I have got here is that in detail, touching on these points, but for the life of us, I can't get your IT or your staff to get it out of here and printed. It's 14 pages, so with your forbearance, if you'd like to see the content,
we'll work with you to
take
try
it
and
off
find some way to
and
get
make
that
it
off.
available to councillors. I just want to open the discussion because I'm going to be taking these elements up with Environment Southland and tourism and farming interests. So you're the first people that I'm just wanting to open that discussion with.
Thank
Okay,
you, Mr.
a
Hodgson.
green future.
And we appreciate the submission and the time you've taken to come along. Unfortunately, we don't actually have time for questions now. That's how you've chosen to use your 10 minutes. That's fine. I'd also wish you continued speedy recovery from your accident as well.
Thank you for that.
Marion. Welcome along. Can I just start with a question of clarification? It's are there two submissions from Anderson House Trust, or am I misreading it?
There are. Thank you.
Okay.
Can I begin?
Yes, please.
Councillors, Mayor and councillors and staff, thank you for hearing us today. We're very keen to present this opportunity to enable you to hear about the things that have gone on in the last 3 years. The most important point we need to make to you, and I know that there's 4 people here who weren't in the council in 2018, is the inconsistent figures that are being presented. Now, in this year's long-term plan 21-31, there's a figure of 900 of 1.2 million to upgrade Anderson House. A figure of 500,000 was quoted by the Chief Executive at a meeting of U3A recently. In the 2018 long-term plan, page 18, a figure of 2 million was quoted. And then there was another figure on page 22 of 1.7 million, and it was part of an option 1, which was approved by this council following hearings. And I'll remind you of the other commitments that this council approved at that time, quoting from a letter on the submissions to everyone who submitted. Alternative water supply, Anderson House, additional pool, Splash Palace, additional funding, Southland Indoor Leisure Centre, living dinosaurs, regional storage facility and museum replacement, and there were timelines on those. Our Anderson House Trust was informed by a staff member at our last meeting that the current amount of 900 will only cover earthquake strengthening and basic maintenance. And you will have seen the pictures of the state of this house that belongs to all of us. There's a lot of work required on the building before it can be open to the public. And the remaining 300,000 in the budget will not cover that work. Where is the budget for additional work? when will the remaining work be scheduled, and will the public have to wait another 3 years for this work to be done? At the 6th of October council meeting of the Infrastructure Committee, there was a deputation from the Anderson House Trust, and councillors unanimously voted to get Anderson House open to the public. And this decision was reported in the Southern Times, and the dollar amount quoted in this item refers to $400 for maintenance and a further $800 to earthquake strengthening and for access improvements. No reference was made there to the original 1.7 million commitment made in 2018. And thank you, Mr. Scout, for raising that. It was reported in the paper, but it is not recorded in the minutes. The Anderson House Trust was formed in 2018 following contracting. The Venture Southland, now Great South, called for expressions of interest to occupy the house. We put forward a proposal in good faith stating how we would operate Anderson House, and this was followed later with a staged timeline and plan with key performance indicators. That registration of interest has never been acknowledged or responded to by Invercargill City Council. The Chief Executive also told that meeting of the U3A that several tenants have been considered, but none have been successful. We have never been informed of other registrations of interest, but we do know of a commercial interest following a consultant's report on the use of Anderson House, with designs which included a really expensive upgrade. This plan had a figure to lease the property, so we went off and went to a caterer and a restaurant owner to get those figures sorted. And it was found that that lease figure was not a viable option for any business to operate at that time. So that may have been what the Chief Executive was referring to. Councillors are the community's governance directors of this multi-million-dollar business, and we as citizens have entrusted each of you to make decisions and see them carried out, or given a very good reason publicly why they're not. The oversight and follow-up is your responsibility as our representatives. We do not see this happening. Based on ours and the public's opinion and first-hand experience of working with council and staff to get Anderson House open. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I just correct a small point, and that council's unanimous vote was to make the building weathertight,
Okay, well, the report in the
not a
paper.
full upgrade. Well,
Okay.
we don't control that.
Okay.
Can I ask? Thanks for the submission, Marion. Can I ask, for us to be able to go beyond weathertight and go to an upgrade, we would first need to know what the purpose of the building is. Would you accept that as
Yeah.
reasonable?
Accept that.
To the best of your knowledge, has a purpose been identified that we're not aware of?
We have identified several purposes and issued that KPI to the manager of Parks and Recreation at that time, and it should be available in your records.
But those purposes have not been adopted by
No,
council?
no, they haven't been made or considered by council. But Mr. McQuarrie is running a workshop tomorrow about possibility of events and things happening in the...
Yeah, well, understand and appreciate that's still a work in progress. Thank you. Councillors, it's open for questions. Councillor Pottinger.
Right. The thing that we did pass about weather tightening, structural strengthening the roof and doing that up, that keeps it original with the ability to open the door. Still the same toilet. So the next step, if it was to be used as a venue, do you agree, or what are your comments on, would it need better bathrooms, toilets, wheelchair accessibility, better kitchen, catering? Because that's another step, and I just wonder if...
That's what was agreed to in the 2018 long-term plan, which you seem to enjoy making long-term plans. This is the second one in 3 years.
No, I'm just asking the question now, sorry.
Okay. It says here that there was a commitment to put a lift in and toilets and make it accessible to the public.
Yeah, I was aware of that that dream thing, and the lift was on the outside and everything, and yeah. So that obviously never went through. So with the current situation and keeping the building original to the Historic Places Trust, which I think it must be, do you think major alterations inside are warranted to keep up with code?
Well,
which would have to be.
you would know what the code requires.
Yeah, it is
I'm
major.
not right up with the code, but yeah, I'm aware that there is also criteria around the heritage status of the building, which I'm aware of. But yes, I don't know that there would need to be structural alterations.
No, it's not the structural side. It's putting in the toilets and stuff,
absolutely.
wheelchair.
That's a commitment for every public building, is it not?
So that would be, you would expect council for its next step to be that commitment.
Yeah, I would hope that that's been factored into a budget.
And that, I imagine, would you expect that commitment to be tied in with guidance on usage? Rather than just
probably,
doing it?
But again, I mean, usage is how long is a piece of string? I mean, if
Chicken and egg thing.
We're a voluntary group, we need to raise money and probably appoint an events manager should we be able to take the building over. But the reality is, down the track, 10 years' time, we may not be there. There may be another group, or it may morph into something else. So you have to future-proof these things.
Could I just add that it's very difficult to see much enthusiasm in terms of future use of a building that's barely weathertight and in need of earthquake strengthening and nothing physical happening. So it's very hard to develop much enthusiasm for a project when you can't quantify how long it's going to be before you can kick it off.
That's right. Exactly.
Or what shape you're going to have finished to work with.
Okay.
Thank you again. It's a chicken and an egg situation. And Marion, I'm sure with your long experience in local government, you're aware that long-term plans are an obligation that we have to go through every 3 years. I don't think I'd stick to every 3 years. Every 3 years we have to produce a 10-year plan. 30 years for infrastructure. It's a thrilling thing.
I can see your enjoyment.
Actually, it's been a pretty good 2 days so far. Councillors, any further questions? If not, look, we appreciate the submission and understand the position that you're in, and thank you for coming along this afternoon.
Thank you.
Marcus, welcome along.
Kia ora tātou, Your Worship, councillors and council staff. Ko Marcus Roy Takawinga. I'm here to speak on behalf of the Southland Mountain Bike Club submission and all the other associated submissions that were received in support of that submission.
Thanks, Marcus. Could you just drag that microphone over a little bit? Cool, thank you.
There you go. Our submission does not provide input on the major topics consulted on for this LTP, rather it focuses solely on the parks and reserve activity. In consideration of the time, and I don't envy the position of the councillors in the afternoon slot just after lunch, so I appreciate the hard work you're doing. I appreciate it. It's a bit hard to keep on track. I want to make sure I spend the time wisely, and for your ease, the front page of the submission outlines the key points, which I really want to draw to your attention. I don't expect you to read the whole document, but if you can hone in on those front key points, it's the key message. Effectively, I want to speak to 3 key components of that in my few minutes I've got with you. First point is the people. So people are one of the key reasons the province of Southland is a great place to live and do business, and having a city with heart is important. However, people are the lifeblood, providing vibrancy to our spaces, places, businesses and events. They're the culture, the support, the comfort, our connection and our future. Open spaces play a vital role for enabling people to be mobile, feel connected to nature, recreate, play and create opportunities. Queen's Park is no doubt a jewel of Invercargill and highly used by the community. However, many other places and spaces within the ICC jurisdiction are underutilised, run down and undervalued. Second key point, Motupuhui Bluff. In the 88-page Parks and Reserves Activity Management Plan, Bluff was mentioned specifically 4 times. As outlined in the Southland Regional Tourism Strategy and the Bluff Master Plan, Bluff's got a lot of potential to be a significant drawcard for the region. And the Mountain Bike Club considered that some targeted support and specific projects would unlock wide-ranging opportunities for the people of Bluff and Invercargill. Third key point, opportunity. Southern Mountain Bike Club has developed a mountain bike master plan which facilitate all 4 of the local government wellbeings while utilising the Invercargill City Council reserve land on Bluff Hill. And we're keen for your support to establish a regional mountain biking destination which will deliver the following benefits for the community. A new low carbon tourism activity for Bluff, drawing visitors from around Otago and Southland to ride. Business opportunities associated with mountain biking tourism, bike hire, bike shops, coaching, uplift shuttle services. Hospitality industries associated with food, beverages, accommodation providers, recreational health benefits for local residents having a well-designed and developed facility on their doorstep. Ecological enhancement, supporting the Bluff Hill Motupuhuri Environmental Trust with the great work that they're doing to restore the muri of Motupuhuri by removing wilding pine trees, establishing ecological corridors, pest trapping corridors, and planting natives along the new mountain bike track. Establishing new walking tracks from the main street near the businesses up to the top of the hill, so you could have connectivity from the businesses up and over and round and back. And also linking mountain bike trails with the Bluff and Invercargill cycleway that's being created at the moment. Iwi and historic interpretational signage showcasing Bluff and the history of the hill. And also hold annual or biannual national level events drawing national visitors and potentially international visitors to town. So attached mountain bike master plan, which was attached to the submission, with your support will enable cultural, economic, social and environmental opportunities for the people of Bluff and Invercargill who will continue to be the lifeblood of our province. And accordingly, what we're seeking in the submission there is to bring some of the allocated funding for that activity forward to enable us to unlock that potential sooner and derive benefits sooner than anticipated. So those are the key points I wanted to talk to, but I appreciate that there may be some questions on the submission. So.
Thanks, Marcus. Can I kick off with one? Having been down there to provide shuttle services myself, I was astounded at the numbers that were on the trails. Do you have any idea how many people are making use of the trails?
We don't.
Across a weekend?
Effectively, we haven't got track counter numbers or volumes. So the Mountain Bike Club has currently about 400 members of active paying memberships, but we know that there's thousands of people that use the mountain bike tracks at Sandy Point and Bluff that are not members, are visitors to Southland and don't contribute financially to the club. And I guess as part of the club, we see ourselves as providing facilities for the community, but we're doing that off our own takings and our own financial benefit from races and events. And unfortunately, we haven't got the capacity to undertake a project of this manner with the way we've been doing it in the past. So we need to change our game and seek funding to actually do some more work.
Thank you. Councillors, open for questions. Councillor Lush.
Yeah, Marcus, with the proposal for the bike path from Ocean Beach, have you got a proposal there for Ocean Beach round the back of the hill? Is that on private land?
Yeah, so we have had discussions with the private landowner that was previously a farm, and they are keen to facilitate mountain biking tracks on their private land. This proposal that we're seeking to solely talks to initial tracks within the Department of Conservation estate that is right on the top of the hill, and also the Invercargill City Council reserve land. Long term, the Mountain Bike Club think that it would be great to establish a coastal cycle trail to a Maui around the back beaches, which would be a great one-day ride that would link to Bluff and a Maui, but that is not part of this initial proposal, but it's something futuristic that, given sufficient time down the track, that it could be an opportunity worth investigating.
And you'd use shared riding between Stirling Point and the Lookout? Is that the way that would complete that? Is that something you've thought of?
Not specifically. We've had initial discussions, but that links in with the Te Aroa Trail and some of the Department of Conservation estate too. So there's a few processes that would link in, but there is some water races on the eastern side of the hill that link in with the existing reservoirs that could provide good tracks that will stick to a general good grade elevation around the front side of Bluff Hill.
Okay.
To get to Stirling Point and back as well.
Thank you. Other questions, councillors? If not, thank you not only for your submission, but the work that you're doing in the area to facilitate an activity that seems to be growing in stature and engagement. and also for taking the time to come along and speak to your submission this afternoon. We appreciate it.
Thanks very much.
Lillian. Welcome along.
Thank you. My submission on behalf of the St Paul's Harrier and Athletic Club is on the Surrey Park Grandstand renewal. The St Paul's Harrier and Amateur Athletic Club submit the support of Athletic Southland's request that the proposed demolish and replacement of the grandstand at Surrey Park is postponed for 12 months and that the 1.5 million budget for the work remains allocated and held over for that period. St Paul's acknowledges that the existing grandstand has been assessed as having structural issues that propose a safety risks to users. The demolish of the grandstand presents the athletic community with a unique opportunity to rethink the traditional configuration and use of facilities. The St Paul's is committed to doing, in partnership with other users, if the council agrees, to defer making a decision about the grandstand until there has been time to identify funding partners, development of appropriate collaborative strategy approach supported by businesses case. St Paul's intends to play its part in forming a plan which delivers the outcome identified at the Southland Regional Space and Places Strategy. St Paul's may be sacrificing much in the process, but are willing to work cooperatively to deliver the best result for the wider athletic community and other users, not only now but in the future. The proposed replacement grandstand is too small. St Paul's is concerned the current grandstand proposes a seating of 200 to 300 spectators and competitors as being short-sighted. The Optimum Report Group used Christchurch and Timaru as their examples. As we all know, weather is very changeable down here. If we take our competitive months where major athletic meetings could be held from December to April, Christchurch on an average has 6.2 days of rainfall per month. Timaru has 6.7 days rainfall. Invercargill has 10.4 days rainfall per month, as we are more likely to need to use the grandstand more often than for the well-being of our athletic community. I was in Christchurch in April this year when the South Island Secondary School Athletic Track and Field Champs were held. The weather suddenly turned for the worst with strong winds and rain. There was only standing room available in the grandstand for shelter, so many people that could left the venue instead of supporting their teams. St Paul's is disappointed that we had no opportunity to have input into expressing our views before it went to the Surrey Park Future Development business case that was presented to you in February this year. The resulting uncertainty and lack of information had been frustrating. Southland Athletics community is planning for growth and innovation. St Paul's urged councils to press the pause button to give us all concerned the time to develop a grandstand that is multi-user for not only athletics, football, but future endeavours at Surrey Park.
Thank you. Thank you for your submission. Just a quick question with something you were talking about there with the Surrey Park plan. Did the Surrey Park users group not consult with you at all?
We had one speaker there, but that was it.
Did they not consult with the user groups?
Yeah, they were there present.
Okay. Speakers yesterday talked about orienting the new grandstand a little further down the track.
Yep.
How does that sit with the way the weather comes? Is that, from St Paul's perspective, a good move?
Well, if they move the grandstand more towards the finish line, that's where St Paul's is.
How much use do you make of your rooms? How heavily are they used? Sorry.
They are used quite a lot by different, not only by athletics. The schools use them and hire them out. We've had netball teams that have had tournament at the stadium use it. Softball teams use it. So it's reasonably widely used.
Okay. Councillor Rabbit.
No, I just have to take leave for a couple of minutes.
Oh, absolutely. Councillor Skelt.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Thanks, Elaine. And just a couple of other submitters talked about the car parking, accessibility around that area. Given the opportunity of taking a pause button, do you see, as others did, perhaps there may be some redevelopment around that to get better access into that area? There was discussion around, I think, coming off Tay Street. Have you got any thoughts around that?
I don't have a problem with that. We've just got to make sure that we don't lose out, basically.
Would it be a desire for you to increase that situation going forward? If we could get some increased parking around that area?
Yep.
As long as it wasn't parallel, we all good?
Yep.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you. Further questions, councillors? If not, thank you very much for coming along this afternoon. We appreciate it. Craig, welcome back.
Thank you for hearing me. So I am presenting this afternoon on Anderson House, and I know you've already heard one submission on that. We've also, in our written submissions, I set it out in bullet point form to try and be pithy and to the point, and so hopefully you've had the opportunity to have a look at that. In the media recently, we've seen 2 articles on Anderson House, and I was wondering about that, so I rang the Southern Times and I said, how is it? These articles on Anderson House just seem to keep popping up out of the woodwork now and again, and the person I spoke to at the Southern Times says, well, look, we can't reveal sources to you, but I can tell you we have quite a sophisticated database, and the database looks back at articles we've previously written, and it brings them up again and says, is this still relevant? Do you want to publish something on this again? And Southern Times says it's very sophisticated. All we need to do is change dates and the odd little tweaking of a name here and there and push republish. And hey, presto, in 1 minute flat, we've got a new article on Anderson House. And he said, we know nothing much happens with Anderson House, so it's a great thing to pop up every now and again, and we run the story and everybody's happy. And in fact, the Southern Times went on to tell me, it might come as news to you, that their database is so sophisticated it can predict the future. It's a little bit like that movie Back to the Future, where you see photos change and whatnot as events happen. They said, our database can also do that. I said, really? So what happens if you punch in Anderson House 2031 to time with this annual plan? What happens? I said, well, again, I'm a bit nervous about this, but he said, look, I'll send you the article that pops up. So he sent me the article through. So I'll quote. It says, Council undertakes to have Anderson Park Homestead reopened to the public next year. This, of course, is in the year 2031. I might even have to put my glasses on to read this. 18 years since the council closed Anderson Park. At a council infrastructure committee meeting yesterday, the green light was given for council staff to draw up a terms of reference for a project manager to be appointed to manage the earthquake strengthening and related maintenance work at Anderson House. While this had previously been approved as early as the 2018-28 LTP and subsequent LTPs, and the latest 2031-34 LTP, council believe they're now on firm grounds to declare that work on the work will commence with a view to having Sir Robert Anderson's former home being open to the public again next year. Mayor blank blank, it wouldn't give me that information, gave thanks to former Mayor Pottinger for getting matters to this point. Mayor blank blank noted that unfortunately Mr Pottinger could not be at the meeting after his Zimmer frame legs became stuck in a pothole in his non-existent pathway outside his Morris Bush residence. Anderson House Trust representatives were astonished and dismayed at the news. Trust Chair Craig McAllister was astonished Mayor Pottinger could not recall Morris Bush has no footpaths, and dismayed yet again that the council could not recall having approved this work in the previous 4 LTPs. Mr McAllister said on behalf of the residents of Invercargill, the Trust remains disappointed the only visible thing council have managed to do at Anderson Park in all these years was to spend $200,000 relocating the Don Street umbrella to Anderson Park, developing the Duck Pond as an ecological heritage site and an aviarian retirement village. Ends. That's my attempt at humour. But the point being that we will spin on this project continuously without really making any firm progress towards getting it to where we want it to go. And so to come to my more formal submission points, to reiterate the point that Marion made on the 1.7 million approved in the 2018-28 long-term plan, the current figure now at 1.2 million, that's fine, and we appreciate councils doing work in the background, but there is so much more to be done on that house than just getting it strengthened and just doing some maintenance work to improve its weather tightness. Opening the door, when you open the door, the house is quite tight inside and there's an awful lot of restoration type work to bring it up to an acceptable venue that people would enjoy visiting. So I mean, again, there seems to be a $500,000 discrepancy that has evaporated on us, and we would like to sort of perhaps understand a bit more about that. In Invercargill's 2018-2028 LTP, under some obscure heading called Monitoring of Community Outcomes, and then under another subheading, the community outcomes are, there's a piece that says to preserve its, and I presume it's as Invercargill's character. We will know success when Invercargill is celebrated for preserving its heritage character. Well, where does Anderson Park House sit when we're talking about preserving Invercargill's character? I would have thought that's a premier example of the character of Invercargill yet. It just sits there very idle, has done for 7 years, and seems to be rotting away. And that's to say we know success when it's celebrated preserving. Well, I'm not sure that we can celebrate preserving Anderson House at this point in time yet. The other thing with Anderson House that doesn't often get raised is that the Wharapuni. So the Wharapuni has bora in it. Some attempts were made earlier on to get rid of the bora, but there's still bora there and it comes back through. And the panels that were carved on that Wharapuni by a very well-regarded carver, I don't know if they're at risk of bora, but I mean, again, it's something that needs to be attended to, but something doesn't need to wait on the work on the house. It can be carried out quite independently of the work on the house. 2021-31 LTP states, Council will make improvements to make the building safe and enable the building to reopen to the public in 2021. Well, I think that's probably a bit optimistic, but also, even when the building is reopened to the public, the question is what reopened to the public in what way? And in this regard, I sort of found the roadmap to renewal wasn't particularly a masterpiece of vision when it came to describing, well, what are we going to do when we open the door? And we can all talk about what uses we're going to have for it, but we have to, when we open the door to the public, we've got to then use it for something. And at the moment, it's just not possible really to use it for anybody. There's only 2 toilets downstairs. The upstairs rooms are full of old art gallery storage equipment. The upstairs toilet facilities in the old caretaker's flat, and it too is a circa 1970s. It's all the old, you might recall that green ceramic stuff. It's pretty tired. It all needs quite a bit of work in bringing it up to speed. So, and I just make the point that it's a bit disappointing that the long-term plan didn't go on to sort of say, look, we know we need to do some stuff, and here's what we're going to do, and here's how we're going to budget it. I think the point Marion raised is, well, we don't want to just then get the door open, and then we're going to have another round of discussions and fundraising for yet again, and while yet again the door remains closed. I mean, the Trust ran a family fun day at Anderson Park recently. We had circa 700 people there. It was a fabulous day. I rang the council and said, can we open a window or door to plug a plug-in so the SIT music people can have electricity? And there was horror. You can't plug a plug-in. You might blow a fuse. Well, if we can't plug a plug-in now, can we plug a plug-in when we open the door? If we can't, can we start work on this now so we understand and get it dealt to now? Why do we keep waiting? It's almost like there's a staged process to nowhere on this thing. The other point finally I want to make on this is the grounds. So, you know, the Trust made a lot of submissions on what we could do within the grounds. Perhaps we could have some Wi-Fi in the grounds. Perhaps we could have some coffee facilities in the grounds. Stuff that doesn't rely on the house being open, not hard to do, bring it into the 21st century for visitors. Well, we're still sort of haven't done anything. And again, I guess it gets a little bit disappointing when the only status quo is nothing. So my point is, don't let this council be the one that forms the basis of the above headlines in 2031. What we want are headlines such as Anderson Park celebrates 100th wedding anniversary at the park since reopened. ILT hold their AGM at Anderson Park. Anderson Park voted New Zealand's top wedding venue for 3 years running, bringing an estimated $30 million into the city. Prime Minister of New Zealand, Right Honourable Penny Simmons, hosts key Australian Minister Dan Park. Pottinger trips over Zimmer frame in Anderson Park car park on way to his own 50th wedding anniversary. The Anderson House Trust urges the council to grasp the opportunity now to restore and develop Anderson Park, and in context to take the Trust's concerns on board and confirm the full allocation of funds appropriated in the 2018-2028 LTP for getting the building, including the interior, fit for purpose as a function and event centre that all Invercargill residents can be proud of.
Thanks, Craig. Can I ask you a similar question? Thanks for the entertainment as well.
Yes.
Can I ask you a similar question that I put to the previous speakers? And that if we spend money to make sure the building is weather tight in this instance, is it wise for us to spend more money on the interior until we've determined what the use is?
But I think the uses are fairly well understood. For example, there's the obvious one of weddings, but there's conferences, there's hiring it out for other functions, such as people's wedding anniversaries, or organisations might want to hire it to host to have a function for their firm. There's plenty of uses there, but all of those uses, the interior is going to have to be up to a similar standard. Regardless of whatever use goes on in there, we're going to have at least some functioning toilets. Caterers are going to have somewhere to put food and maybe keep it warm and chill things. There's nothing there now. The kitchen's just gutted and gone. So we just do need to think about it, what I'm trying to say, now, rather than leave it till we get the door open and then we go, well, now what? Yeah, because otherwise we could sit around another 3 or 4 years. And Chris, is sort of my point I'm trying to make here, is that we don't want to be another 10 years down the track and still, and I don't want you to be the council that lets us get to that stage where we're still trying to talk about what we're going to do in it.
Thanks, Craig. Councillor Zimmerframe Pottinger.
I'm looking forward to that day. Craig, walking inside Anderson House, it's after being in the grounds and looking at it and its splendour, it's actually incredibly underwhelming.
It is underwhelming.
Yeah, you walk in there and it's a whole lot of small rooms, a lot of small rooms, and I remember.
Can we get to the question, because we are tight on time?
Yeah, okay,
we've run the second bell.
Would you be prepared to sort of gut the place to make it usable as a venue? Because I don't believe it is usable.
Downstairs, as is. Upstairs, it will need consideration about perhaps room.
Okay, but I'm just trying to understand. The question is, how would it function as a wedding venue where it's just too small? It's just not practical.
Right. So there are provision that we're putting this for the grounds for marquee sites and the like.
Okay, so that would happen outside.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Councillor Skelt.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Craig, I guess from what we've heard, and it's an embarrassment to be honest, both the previous council and the current one, but having passed what we have passed, so I find it incredibly disappointing. But moving forward, let's look forward. Is the vision for you you're asking council now to take a leap of faith in the sense of getting something done?
Yes.
The good part about that is obviously you're fully aware with Erin and Steve have worked really hard on trying to.
This is a question, isn't it, Councillor?
Well, it leads to the next question, but
I'll come back to time again.
All right, well, okay. You're asking for a leap of faith enough for us to get our backsides into gear and do something.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Councillor Clark. Sorry,
Yeah,
one more.
I'll just have a
Last
question without any other comment for you, Craig. It seemed in your submission that you were talking about basically 2 stages. One was the earthquake-prone remedial work and the water tightness of the building, which is basically exterior. But then you were also saying that you need some internal work done. So my question is it possible for council to do the former and leave the second phase to be done at further discussion, or are you saying it should all be one package?
Well, there's some work that could be done now, for example. And the problem is that through the infrastructure committee meeting, it was signalled to the public, look, work is going to commence. I think even the Otago Daily Times said, commence immediately, and yet nothing's happening. And I suppose, so, for example, even just some exterior cleaning,
Sure.
some exterior paint work could be done. We don't need to wait on the earthquake strengthening to do some of this stuff, is the point I'm trying to make, really.
One quick question, just to clarify your remedial work that you're talking about on the outside of the building, which is making it watertight. You'd need to do that after you've done the strengthening work, wouldn't you?
Look, maybe ideally, but there's nothing stopping us painting some of it or doing some of the woodwork. The windows are starting to split and crack. Why can't we go in there, remove some of those, take them away, repair them, put them back in? That's
Seen
sort
that.
of work. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McAllister. Mr. Swain. Welcome along again, sir.
How are you? Thank you for the opportunity to come along and talk to you. I've really just taking an overview of your long-term plan, to be quite honest. There are several areas of concern to me, and one is the sporting venues in Invercargill, and the other one is the question of the rates. I'm the chairman of the Southern Food Bank, so I deal with a lot of the other underprivileged and people who are feeling the pinch of quite a bit about the rates. The thing about the sporting venues is that the hub of in Invercargill is the stadium, and Nigel and his team are doing a great job to induce people to come, and I thank you for that. And the other thing is that in that area too, there's the other grandstand which the athletic clubs and the soccer clubs have been using for many years and don't use much now. I think it's a priority that that gets done sooner rather than later. I see in the review the other day that the the soccer people and the athletics may see it as an opportunity to build their club rooms in it. Well, as long as they come up with the money for the club rooms, I don't have a problem with it. But I think the council needs to fire ahead and get that grandstand up and going as soon as possible, in my humble opinion. And of course, the other grandstand is the rugby park one. Well, that's an unusual kettle of fish, to be quite honest. The park is only used for rugby, as Peter Keaton and I know now, at this time. And the amount of games we get there, unfortunately, is about 6 to 8 in the season, I think, Pete, without getting any representative games. So you've got to balance up, do you want the full grandstand or do you downsize the grandstand? And that's an interesting question. I've been a season ticket holder for many, many years, and I've noticed now that people are dropping off and the grandstand is not full, never has been for the last 3 to 4 years. That's probably the Stags' fault for not winning the games. But even so, you've got to take that on board when you're doing these costings. So that's two priorities. And as that last gentleman was talking about, the other thing that gripes me a wee bit is with tourism, which you're doing a great job with getting people into the town, they have to have somewhere to go. And one of the ones that was closed down because of the so-called earthquake risk was Anderson's house, the water tower, and that's about it. Now, I've lived in this city for over just about 80 years, and I can count on my hand how many times we've had an earthquake and how much damage is done in that time. It's been nothing. So we've been in a bit of a fool's paradise with this earthquake thing, in my opinion. But I do believe, like the last gentleman was saying, if you could do something to Anderson House, do the outside, make it look like the old house it used to be. Because I was reading an article up in one of the North papers, actually, and it said, it's great to go to Anderson's Park, but don't go too close to it. View it from a distance, because you see all the faults. But there's no reason, as he said, why don't you do the outside, waterproof it? Which leads me to another question, which the council hasn't addressed in their long-term plan. What about the buildings down the end of Wapna Place? You own those, and they're due to be demolished, because there's no way you're going to repair those ones, but you haven't got that in your long-term plan. So that's the main thing, that you seem to put things on, and then you move them back, and you keep moving them back, and they don't get done. So I encourage you to stop that attitude, get stuck in, and get the main points done so we can get the people back into town. And the other thing I'm pleased to see that you've agreed to the S Street upgrade. I'm not sure what it is, but I just hope that with the S Street upgrade, you limit all the cars and take them right out altogether. Because it'd be an ideal precinct like they have up in Christchurch, where you can walk around without cars coming through. But I see in the earlier plan they wanted to have cars, or about 12 or 20 cars coming to it. I'd wipe all the cars out altogether. You may have done that already. And the other thing is, of course, don't cut the 4 lanes down on the main streets, because Invercargill is renowned for its wide streets, and I can't see any sense in cutting them down, because you'll just end up with a bottleneck at the War Memorial on the corner. So you're better off to keep your streets wide, cut out your S Street Presbyterian people, and then we'll have a decent city. So I can only like to say that thank God we've got the ILT, the Richardson Group, and SITS on the ground, because they are the ones that are actually moving the city. So it's now up to you people to get up, give it a shove, and get it going again. Now, as regards to the rates, this is the thing that I am gravely concerned about. I know you set your level at 5% over the next, say, 10 years, whatever it is. We deal with people who are struggling. It's right across the spectrum of Invercargill. You mightn't see it here, but we go out and visiting these people with food, etc. So it's a major problem out there. And if you keep increasing your rates by 5% each year, which you're planning to, they're not going to cope. That includes pensioners, beneficiaries, and ordinary people. It's just going to get out of kilter. But I don't know how you're going to overcome that one, because your budgets are pitched to a point, aren't they, in your long-term plan? And if you don't get that money coming in, you're in trouble. But you cannot keep putting the pressure on the ratepayers of Invercargill. And the other one is, of course, I think the ratepayers at Bluff have been a bit hard done by. They wanting their pool upgraded, which makes sense to me. And there's some, I read their submissions the other day, and I think they're right. You know, the Bluff should get that pool up and running for the kids down there, and all those who want to learn how to swim. And the town itself is quite vibrant, because the people have got a I'll do it attitude down at Bluff. Like they got the Bluff Oyster Festival, and anything else that comes along, they're all hooking behind it. So we've got to give consideration of looking at how you're going to balance your rates out. Now, some people come back and say, oh, you get a rates rebate. Well, that's true, you do get a rates rebate, but the rates rebate is not going to cover the money that's going out all the time. It's going to erode it. So anyway, I'd just like to say you're on the right track. There's one or two things need tidied up. We have got a vibrant city coming up with a new precinct down here. And the question of the playground for the kids, I don't think it's required in Invercargill. I know the one in Christchurch, I've seen it, and it's a beautiful setup. But we haven't got the population to warrant it. And if you did do it, where are you going to put it? It was suggested on the last time you did up S Street, we do it down at the old RSA bowling ground, club grounds, but it's not big enough for a decent playground anyway. So you've just got to keep that in mind. But as I said, we're a vibrant city. If we just give it a nudge and get it up and running again, we'll be right. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Swain, for your submission, and thank you for your mahi with the food bank as well on behalf of our community. We appreciate it. Councillors, open for questions if there are any.
I'll let you off this time. You're running out of time.
Thanks very much, Mr. Swain. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
No notes, eh?
Mr. Butson.
No notes.
Good timing, sir. Welcome along.
Thank you.
We have your submission, and for the next 10 minutes, you have the floor. Please have a seat.
Thank you. Your Worship, councillors, I've come in a personal capacity to you here today. I am a member of the Southland Rugby Referees Association, and I don't know if it's always that well known that our club room is at Rugby Park, so particular interest in speaking to you about Rugby Park today. So, preferred option is in my submission. Love to see that go ahead. Ideally, I'd love to see that go ahead in a more accelerated time frame, but I realise you have other constraints upon you at the moment. Just from a few personal words about why Rugby Park is so important to us, obviously having the clubhouse there is a big asset to us, simply because refereeing, as you could probably imagine, isn't always necessarily an easy job. And the room that we retain there is very important for the development of younger referees, the education of all the referees, and establishing a consistency across the association as well to make sure that when we're going out that the rugby clubs and the public that we're serving actually has a level of referee that's consistent from one week to the next, and you're not wondering what you're dealing with on any particular weekend. So for me, being a sort of a little bit longer in the tooth now, I'm getting a wee bit slower on the paddock, just having the rooms there, especially for seeing the younger guys come into a place that's been the home of Southland rugby for a long time, and certainly the Referees Association has been established for, I think we're in our 127th year now, and the vast majority of that we have had a presence at Rugby Park. So seeing those young guys come into the club room, looking over the pitch at Rugby Park, and just you can see what effect it has on them. It's a great motivator, and for me, it's been a unique one as well, because having refereed in 4 different associations, to be able to actually go to your home of rugby is just an absolutely fantastic asset to have, and it just makes you feel really like you're part of something, and it's a magnificent feeling to have. And I think the other side of it is having that clubhouse there as well. It's a good social outlet for us too. Certainly from a refereeing point of view, I don't know whether anyone here would relate to this or not, but sometimes when you've finished your job on a Saturday afternoon, you come off the pitch and no one's really talking to you, and you feel like you've done an absolutely crap job. To be able to go back to a group that has the same backgrounds, the same experiences as you, especially, and I know I describe myself as long in the tooth, but there's a couple of guys possibly longer in the tooth than me at the association. To come back, to be able to talk to those guys about it who have been in the same position before, just really helps you from an emotional point of view, but also from a developmental point of view, help you tackle those situations. So really the idea behind me talking to you is, I don't think everyone realises that we have a presence at Rugby Park, what an important thing it is for us to have a club room that we can belong to. And just in the context of, I believe that we provide a valuable service to not just the Invercargill public, but the Southland public as a whole for what we do at the weekends during the winter, because it is a voluntary thing. We're not being paid for what we do. And most of us love it, but there are times when we don't. So I just wanted that to be part of the consideration with the development of Rugby Park, that we're a community group, we're working out of there, we're doing our best for the Southland public, and we would support that. Well, sorry, I'm saying we, I'm talking probably for too many of us, but from my personal point of view, I'd really like to see that development of Rugby Park go ahead.
Thanks, Adrian. I know there's at least one person at the table who will understand the scrutiny and criticism that comes with adjudicating sports matches. And we all know what it's like to be in front of people and subject to comment and criticism. So we appreciate where you're coming from. From the perspective of the referees, though, do you have an opinion on a desire from council to see more user groups making use of the facilities at Rugby Park?
I can't speak for the association as a whole. My own personal point of view is there's council involvement, therefore there's involvement from the wider public of Invercargill, and I think if it was going to be utilised for other outdoor sports, then certainly that would be an avenue that would have to be open, absolutely, so that the whole public could have access and enjoy the outdoor sports there.
Thank you. Councillors, any other questions or comments? Your Worship.
Yes, Adrian. At the moment, there seems to be a lot of diversification in rugby, the 9s and 7s and women's rugby, and do you think there's enough there to stem the tide of big 60-inch TV sitting at home on the couch?
In terms of you talking about people going out and actually bums on seats and attending games, Your Worship?
Yes.
I think when it's your team involved and that And we have seen that other venues, there is often other items on the agenda, and certainly last year I know that they did run a couple of things with the NPC games, such as the Blair Vining game and the general admissions. I think that side of things will have to be part of it to entice people in, but for certainly people with a love of the game and those associated with the team, you're always going to get those ones coming. And I think we probably see that at the smaller clubhouses week in, week out, about who's turning up and the support that those teams are getting. So my finishing statement on that would be a cliche, but you build it and they will come.
Thanks, Adrian. No further questions. Thank you. Oh, sorry, Councillor Skelt.
Thanks, Adrian. You mentioned the culture and how important the ground was to, obviously, from the referee's perspective and obviously trickling down. You're a broken family at the moment. Would that be a fair comment in the sense of a home? Well, there isn't a home. Is that fair?
I suppose the big danger for us is if we were to become without a home. We struggle at the moment for retention and recruitment. What effect that would have on us, even purely from, we've got quite a good setup now with the meetings, the education, etc. But if that focus was being pulled away from developing our referees and we've got referees who are touch judging or assistant refereeing, should I say, for NPC level. And some of those, and we do have ones who are being actively looked at in terms of further advancement within the system. It is one of those issues, if we take our eye off the ball in terms of that core role of developing referees, to what are we going to do about where are we going to meet, what sort of audio-visual things are we going to have, etc. That would be very hard on us as an association.
I was just trying to dive a wee bit deeper in the sense of the collective larger problem we've got with rugby as it sits at the moment and the facility linking to the LTP. But we've got the high performance guys, we've got the admin guys, we've got the coaches, we've got the stags, all in different parts.
Yes.
And disseminated in the city, for want of a better word. And you guys are another part of that. Trying to flip it on its head, how would you feel as if we found a home for the total group? Do they necessarily have to be at Rugby Park, just thinking totally outside the square? If we could put collectively the whole group together, get the family back together, regain the culture under one roof, would that, in your opinion, work without necessarily being at Rugby Park?
So, to answer your question in two parts, the first point of having everyone together under the one roof, I think that would be very helpful. Purely, it's going to make some people's roles a lot easier in terms of access. We find so much, especially with the refereeing point of view, communication is such a huge part of the game. And for coaches, players, referees to have access to each other and understand what we're trying to achieve and make sure that we are all singing off the same hymn book is vital to the game. The second part, I'll probably just go back to the written submission I put in. I think the location as it is a very good location because you've got the presence to the CBD. I mean, I've been out to some grounds where you're walking an hour to get out there and you're walking an hour back to town, which is just, from a social point of view, is a horrendous place to be in. Whereas here you're 10, 15 minutes into town. It's great. I think there's also an advantage of the site you've got there is that it's really only bordered by residential properties on the south side, and everything else is essentially a lot more, you're not having to worry about what effects you're having on the residents there for an extent, because you've got the swimming pool, the Caledonian, and then Girls High, and then you've got the green belt, I suppose I'll call it, out to your western side. So from the point of view of it being there, I think it's a good area for it to be. I wouldn't like to see it moved further away from the city centre.
Thank you. Any further questions, councillors? Councillor Lush.
Does the Rugby League Association, the Southern Rugby League, do they have a referees room, a facility they use? Are you aware of that?
I'm not aware of that. I'm sorry, I couldn't speak to that.
Would there be synergies if that code was brought into the rugby stadium as well? Would that be something that the referees could share a facility like that?
I think we'd be open to that happening. I say we. Again, I don't want to speak for the entire association because I can't.
Yeah.
For myself, I think we'd be open to other groups. Yeah, being able to. I'd probably like to see perhaps if the room did belong to one particular group and other groups have access to it. I think that's just easier from even like an equipment and care of things point of view, having one group responsible for that. But certainly in terms of giving access to it, I couldn't see any issue with that.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. If there are no further questions, thank you very much for your submission, Adrian, and for making it along this afternoon.
Thank you very much.
Stella and Ella. Just Stella. Welcome back.
Thank you. Kia ora koutou, Your Worship and councillors. Ko Stella O'Connor, Tokawenga, no Marahuku Aho. My name is Stella O'Connor. I'm a lead systems innovator for Healthy Families Invercargill, and I'm here today as a representative for the Marahuku Kai Collective. Thank you for the opportunity to be heard. And I hope you've all had some good kai since I saw you last. It's been a long day for you all. Speak a bit closer? Cool. So the Marahuku Kai Collective is made up of a number of community groups who have formed around the common vision of enabling Southlanders to have the capability to produce and access good food. So we thank the various Invercargill City Council staff from the Parks and Recreation and WasteNet teams that have contributed to these meetings, and we hope that the ICC management see the value in them continuing to attend. This council has repeatedly shown a commitment to building a strong, cohesive, vibrant community, and we know that you all value the importance of community wellbeing. While there are parts of our community that are thriving, there are also pockets where the opposite is a reality. And feedback from these communities and families show that one of the major struggles is access to quality, nutritious food. This was also exacerbated by the onset of COVID-19 pandemic. Just want to ask you to remember back to last year with the onset of COVID-19. There would have been a point in time when you would have experienced that panicked feeling that you might not have access to food to feed your family. This feeling may have been fleeting for you, but for some of our families that we talk to, this is a reality most days. The pandemic exposed inequalities, but it also revealed solutions. And we know that more shocks and crises are coming. We have the chance to build a more secure, sustainable, resilient local food system, one that is healthier and supports people more fairly. We're here to seed the kōrero about how together we can support a regenerative local food system that is prepared in times of natural disasters, climate change, supports self-sustainability and the need to provide adequately for our communities. So we asked Invercargill City Council, as we've also asked the Southland District Council, and we'll ask the Gore District Council as well, to lead in this space and help co-design and adopt a Marahuku Food Resilience Strategic Plan. This could be used by departments across councils to inform and support their current and identify future work programs and activities relating to food security and food sovereignty. There are various actions that we've tabled that the Invercargill City Council can support and promote alongside the community to reduce barriers so that our local food producers are supported, more of our community are growing their own produce, and our most vulnerable can have access to good food. So now is the time to commit and include food resilience while we're looking at our long-term planning so that our region will have thriving social, economic and physical environments providing healthy, affordable and locally grown food for all people. Thank you.
Thanks, Stella. What sort of financial investment are you suggesting would be involved from council?
So we've tabled sort of some short-term and long-term ideas, as well as our own as the Murihiku Kai Collective. But initially, we're looking, I guess, for your policy people to come on board and look at where they have the food system in your strategies, in your councils, and how you can put everyone from parks, roading, can put that lens across the work that they do.
So, in the initial instance, and you've got your short, medium, and long-term plan, it's a staff resource,
Yes.
existing staff resource you're wanting access to.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Councillors. Councillor Pottinger.
Thank you. I'm just trying to understand what we can do, actually. I mean, when you talk about parks, reserves, roading, we talk about places to grow food, or are we talking about what's transportation of it, or what is it?
Well, it could be anything like that. We had a really good example in the last couple of weeks where Parks team said to us that they've grown chilies in the winter garden, and which is great, edible harvest. But how do we get that out to the community? So they contacted the Kai Collective, who were able to get it out through South Alive. So it's about starting that conversation that if you are going to provide edible plantings, what is the understanding of how the community can access it?
Wouldn't it be more logical, say, that you have the whole Invercargill, all Invercargill people probably grow, the ones that do grow their own, potatoes and vegetables, have excess. And wouldn't that be a great place to start first and get them to sort of say, hey, we're not going to use all these potatoes. Imagine chucking the potatoes in the compost heap, terrible, when they can go, and that's where I'm just saying, have you thought about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where we're asking council to come on board and lead in this space as well and help us. So I talk to people every day that actually don't know where to start with gardening. So it could be that your comms people have something on your website around the conditions for gardening in Southland. They're quite peculiar for Southland compared to the rest of the country. So it's about being part of that conversation with us and using your leadership to amplify and encourage everyone else to be part of it.
Cool.
Those sharing platforms are a good idea, though, because, personally, my garden has everything come online at once. Councillors, any other questions? If not, thank you, Stella, for your submission, and nice to see you back again this afternoon.
Thank you.
Mr. Hodgkinson's at the back. Sir, you'll be interested to know that councillors have had a copy of your presentation delivered to their iPads this afternoon. So they have that full document now.
Yeah, no, just...
Louise. Good. I'm glad you came back in when you did. You're a veteran. And now you've got the safety of a table and a seat. Thank you very much once again for your submission and for coming along this afternoon. You're familiar with the process. The floor is yours.
Yes, I think I'll be familiar with the process and less nervous.
Can you just bring the microphone up, please, Louise? You probably need it closer to you.
Is that better? Yeah, thank you. Anyway, I'm basically here just to submit that the priority is the museum development and the CBD. On the museum issue, I mean, there's no argument that this is the priority, and the cost to the community of its closure is really high. It's gone on for a long, long time, and there's a lot of passion. I just want to say, like, in surveying people, the questions are very simple, aren't they? They don't always get the detail of feeling. So anyways, it serves the community universally. And my submission is that I'm wondering if it can be achieved by starting afresh, by undertaking a cost-effective new build on the tennis courts adjacent to the museum. I think the sentiment is that ratepayers want a museum passionately, at the park, I think the focus on the pyramid is wrong. Like, the questions are too simple. The passion is for the museum sited at the park, and for timeliness and cost effectiveness. And what concerns me about the current plan is its complexity of timing in terms of moving contents out, but its complexity in terms of complexity and risk and cost associated with refurbishing this building. And I actually would acknowledge Mr. Harper, and actually in his submission, like, as a ratepayer, I'm reading that the cost of rebuilding our museum, refurnishing the existing one, is $10,000 per square metre, which is twice the cost of starting from scratch. Now, that's huge, and likely the current option is going to run into problems and cost runovers. I think that's just so startling to ratepayers, the difference in the cost per square metre, that's relevant to really look at this closely again. So I've made a whole list of benefits if you were to the rebuild on the tennis court sites. It just seems sequentially logical in timing. You can start straight away. It delivers its timeliness that's important, and it eliminates the cost of having to take stuff out and back in again. It eliminates your funding of the temporary museum. It just removes risk. And then you can ring fence the problem of the old museum for later. It's storing the contents that's the problem, but it can be just parked aside and dealt with separately. That's. I'm thinking there's a whole, these topics should be explored, and I'm waffling, and you'll have to read my submission. Sorry. And then the other thing's Rugby Park. And I felt angry because I'm going, how does that get there in my timeline for 2023? And Anderson's Park's gone on for 7 years and has talked about being delayed. How does it, and with all respect to rugby, we're just talking the intricacies of one sports interest, one recreational interest, one part of our community. How does that get 9.4 million? That's a lot. And art galleries talked about it 17. There's so much money. It's just huge. How does that get in there? And how is there so much conversation about it relative to these other balls in the air that have been in stasis for years? Right, so we've got over our... And I think ratepayers may feel that quite strongly, that not to do the small things, the big issues need dealt with. Rugby Park, the questions, the survey says, do you want 9.4 or 4.9? Well, if you don't go for 10, because if you don't get it, you'll get 4.9. I think there's a lot of issues here that it's never going to be a multi-use venue. That's been talked up, and Rodney Tribe in his submission has actually said that the proposal to spend money on Rugby Park that is huge results in an annual funding of $550,000. We have 2 existing sports complexes which also have annual funding. Like, can we afford this as a city of 24,000 ratepayers? It's like, so Rodney Tribe writes, the level of ratepayer funding is simply not acceptable, as regardless of what talk there is about additional use, which is largely for rugby, the community as a whole are never going to see any meaningful increase in use or actual return on the funds to justify the ongoing spending. He's got the figures in the report, and he's got the details that this projected events is just not going to stack up. Simply put, the numbers do not stack up. So I have read Mr. Clark's original ideas talking about Surrey Park, and as a ratepayer, I don't have the knowledge, but I'm thinking we have 2 existing sports ground in vicinity, proximal, and that's where our investment should be. I think that's a better formula. I'm not sure. Yeah, that is the better formula. Invercargill City Council and ratepayers are not in a financial position to undertake maintenance or improvements at Rugby Park. Oh, by the way, where's my details? 45% of submitters on Rugby Park said that it should be solely maintenance or not at all. If you lump those 2 groups together, that's 45% said only what you need to do or not at all. and the summary of 55% saying, oh yes, but I actually went through and 33 submissions at least, because I couldn't, there's so much, that's 9% of submitters, they only said spend 9.4 in Rugby Park. They did not submit on priorities and say, if we do this, what do you think that we might be able to do in art gallery? They just said, hey, spend 9.4. That's 9% of those submissions are just, it's real simple, it's rugby. Move it up, says about quite a number of those. And anyways, the spending of this 5 to 10 million on the specific use asset compromises the pool of funds available for other infrastructure. It's not, anyways, I'm sorry, it's not income generating and is a liability disproportionate to its ability to produce future income. We have to remember how much has been spent in the past, which is, I've come up from published sources of $8 million of public money. Do we want to keep flogging a dead horse, I've written, or what do we want and expect from direct ratepayer benefit? There are plenty of champions from rugby who can ensure a good outcome if we were to use existing sports assets. Anyways, sorry. Yeah, it's just duplicative and it's wrong compared to all these other balls in the air.
Thanks, Louise. As always, your submissions are well considered, and we also appreciate how long you've spent going through the other submissions as well and cross-referencing them. You know, that's a fair amount of time, and we appreciate your passion and engagement for that. Councillors, it's open for questions. Councillor Pottinger.
Thank you, Louise. Hi again. January 2015, Council made the decision, split vote 5-4 to purchase Rugby Park. Do you think that councils, first question, do you think it was a great decision? And the second question is, do you think council should actually do one of those business plans or one of those future cost predictive things like we're facing now? That we bought that in 15, now we're facing the expenses. So, yeah, do you think council should be a bit more prudent?
I think absolutely be prudent. I think any spending should be deferred. I think the ownership needs to be reviewed. I think Nobby Clark's ideas of if that's appropriate, to use existing assets and actually look at another use for Rugby Park. But absolutely, there's got to be a plan now looking at its future use, and it has been talked up. But even if some figures can be tweaked about events, it's still, you've got 3 sports stadia in a city of a small size. But yes, I think it needs to be fully reassessed, and I would say the decision to buy it was an unfortunate one. At the time, like, people are vocal and passionate, a section of community, that it was talked up, but any potential for use was talked up, and any potential for risks of maintenance were unknown and unexpressed. And I feel I think it was a swing vote, and I think it was swayed on emotion and not prudent purchase.
Thank you, Louise.
Thank you.
Councillor Amundsen.
Thanks, Chair. I'm interested in your thoughts on the museum, and here you've said that it might be cheaper to build a new one. If it wasn't going to be cheaper to build a new one, would you still be in favour of a new build over retrofitting the existing pyramid?
I can't see how it can be of the same cost or cheaper. If the footprint of building is Wayne Harper has got published figures there from his that must be QV cost builders values. So I can't see it could be cheaper, but actually I see it as I think it's a bit of unknown how it's all going to work if this plan happens. Like, it would be sequentially logical, I think, not just on the building footprint, but the costs of like, how do you do this? Take out everything that's there and have to labour and the cost of storing it to actually have an empty museum to refurbish. There's actually all those peripheral, as well as the construction costs, there's all these peripheral costs of removal and storage. So that I feel if someone, I think if this was scoped or if a new build was assessed, there would be all these additional cost-saving advantages. That's what I feel that it would be logical, and known, timely. You can actually start straight away, because how long is it going to take to remove those contents? It's not a small task, and it removes risk of the unknown things you're going to find in that museum that needed unexpected to fix, and plus the risk of cost overruns and risk of delays, I think, and that may be just as that's hugely, a delay is hugely probably unacceptable. Like, people are quite I think council can deliver. Can deliver. Council can deliver to ratepayers all those things timely, and if it's equal. I can't see that it's going to be dearer.
Thank you. Final question to Councillor Clark.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Louise, just turning that last question around a little bit further, if we had only 50 million to apportion to a current fit out and re-strengthen, as opposed to some suggestion that a new one could cost $70 or $80 million, which is some previous estimates that we've had, what would your view be on if we didn't have the museum, a new museum as big as the current one, given that the current one's got quite a bit of storage in it?
Sorry, can you just say the first part again? The cost of a new build was 70.
If instead of saying, comparing like you did with the previous question,
with the 50 million for refurbish.
Well, we've said in the LTP that the overall cost, not just the city's cost, will be about $50 million to strengthen and redesign the museum. And we know historically that a new build of a similar size would be about $70-80 million plus.
Yeah.
What I'm suggesting is what your view would be if we built one for $50 million and accepted that it was actually smaller in size than the current one, given that we wouldn't have the storage.
That's right. Sorry, yes, I could live with that. I think it's about the effective use of money, isn't it, for the square meters for cost. Actually, that is now that's now confusing me that the footprint is bigger, but I think it's about the cost per square meter and what you're getting for that money, and the timeliness and the cost effectiveness.
Some of the smaller museums I've seen have had
they're
more
wonderful.
flexibility internally.
Yes.
Last question for you, I guess, is given that we might use that as an option to consider, a smaller museum, but that could fit within the budgets, where's the best location for it?
I feel, rather than speak for myself, which is the park, I think the public are saying the park, and that it's for social reasons, for recreational reasons, it's emotional reasons that people link the park and the museum, but it is connecting for the amenity that people go there, they flow out into the park, the elderly, fathers with their children. I think that's the sentiment of the community, and that's what's been submitted to council in the past. I think that would be a big turnaround.
And I've advocated for that.
Not deliver on time, and people are grumpy now that if it went to the CBD, perhaps from a business point of view, it's been talked, that links, but it's actually a ratepayer amenity on many fronts, and that's desired at the park. Is what I'm picking up, not speaking of myself.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Louise. Appreciate your answers to the questions and your submission. Thank you very much for coming along. Rick Zwan, on behalf of Forest and Bird. Now, councillors, his submission is actually on page 1286 of board books. So if you use the swipe bar down the bottom, 1286.
So the password.
Welcome along, Rick. We've got 10 minutes. You can use the whole 10 minutes if you want, or you can leave room for questions. The choice is yours, really.
Alright.
But thank you for your submission and for making yourself available.
Kia ora koutou. It's good to be here. My name's Rick Swan, so I'm the Regional Conservation Manager for Forest and Bird, relatively new to the role, started this year, covering Otago and Southland as well. So yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. Forest and Bird has a long history in the city. The Southland branch has been around for a while, and it's quite an active branch. A lot of members involved out in the community, looking after nature, restoring places, ensuring that our real special species are looked after and adequately protected. And I think that really helps to enhance the well-being of the wider community as well. A lot of people, as you know, choose to live here, and because of the accessibility of the wonderful outdoor areas that we've got around the city, and the nature that is within the city as well, and spectacular coastlines and rivers and mountains. It's a wonderful part of the country to live in. So the core of our submission is to try and encourage the council to recognise the importance of nature broadly and to the city specifically, and recognising that we are living in a dual biodiversity crisis and climate crisis, and there's a huge imperative to do all we can to try and bring nature back into our cities. It's been pushed to a real breaking point. Over decades, we've lost significant amount of Indigenous species, and we're currently facing about 4,000 species at risk or endangered, at risk of extinction or endangered. So that's the sort of broader position that we're in, and the council can play a core part in terms of turning that decline around. So I guess in terms of specific points, we acknowledge the work that the council has done through the latest district plan and some of the advocacy we're involved in that in terms of ensuring that significant natural areas are mapped, and had a look today and can see that there are particular areas that have been mapped and that's accessible. So do want to commend the work that the council has done in that area, and the encouragement I would say is to continue to focus on that, ensure that there is the adequate skills and personnel on staff with ecological expertise to work with landholders to ensure that those areas are recognised and protected, to ensure that we don't face further decline. And noting that there's hopefully going to be more guidance coming out on significant natural areas this year with the National Policy Statement on Indigenous Biodiversity as well. Alongside that, to ensure that those areas are looked after, we would really encourage the council to set aside funding specifically for biodiversity funds that community groups can tap into, or landholders can tap into, to replant areas, undertake trapping activities on their land and in their communities as well, and ensure that the council itself is adequately funding pest and predator control on the reserves that it owns and it's responsible for as well. And when it comes to that planting, we would really encourage a focus on planting Indigenous species rather than exotic forestry. I know there's not huge amounts of exotic forestry in the bounds of the city, but wherever possible, encouraging Indigenous planting. When it comes to recognising climate change, it's never too late for the council to acknowledge and acknowledge the climate crisis that we are working on, and join the number of other councils who have declared a climate emergency, and recognising that the central government has also declared that. So we've seen a huge shift in this area, and the Climate Commission has produced some really good draft advice when it comes to this, and the challenge that we're facing with it is huge and will require all of us to do all we can to, first instance, reduce emissions as much as we can, and then look to mitigate what's left. And when we are undertaking those mitigation activities, ideally focus on planting Indigenous species as well. Some practical things that the council can do is, evaluate its own emissions profiles and look to reduce those in terms of, investing in EVs for its own car fleet, encouraging, the use of building more EV charging stations around the city, and looking at, some things like that don't necessarily cost a huge amount of money, but can be very useful for the residents in terms of interest-free loans for, solar panels and improving, heating and whatnot in the homes around the city. As well as that, looking at how on your own reserves you can undertake restoration plantings and whatnot as well. So I'll probably wrap it up there and happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Rick. Councillors, open for questions. Councillor Pottinger.
No, thank you. Bird life now in Invercargill, is that increasing? And what I'm using as an example is Zealandia up in Crawley, and how the bird concentration there has expanded out into the community.
Yep.
Have we got any phenomenon like that, or does it just come and go in Invercargill? Do you actually measure the native bird life? I know that cats are a problem, and I've engaged a cat deterrent on my property.
So Zealandia has been an incredible asset for Wellington. I lived there for a number of years, and before Zealandia existed, the biodiversity in the city was reasonably dire, but the council did play a pivotal role in getting the likes of Zealandia off the ground, and as far as I'm aware, there isn't any particular predator, similar predator-free zones within the city that would have the same effect in terms of ensuring that there is that real safe place for those birds to breed and get to a critical mass that they then spill out over into the rest of the city. In terms of the specifics of the monitoring, I'm not particularly familiar with Invercargill City specifically, but DOC and MFE do undertake state of the environment reporting, which does look at how our species are doing across the country as well.
Now, the reason I ask that is it'd be a terrible position to be everything's disappearing and then go, oh shit. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And what whenever a new state of the environment report comes out, all the indicators are generally negative. And there is a huge amount of work that goes into reducing the amount of predators, but we also need to make sure that their habitats are protected as well, to try and turn around that decline. So it does take a while to turn around the decline.
Thanks, Rick.
Thanks.
Councillor Clark.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Rick, thank you for your submission. Are you aware that our Parks and Reserve team have a sort of medium-term project to plant one native tree for every population base that we've got? They're working on an assumption that over a period of time they'll plant somewhere between 40 and 50,000 natives in the city.
Oh, that's great to hear. I wasn't familiar with that, so yeah, fantastic.
So that works well underway.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillors, are there any further questions? If not, Rick, again, a detailed submission. Thank you very much for the work that's gone into it and for taking the time to turn up this afternoon. We
Thanks
appreciate
a lot
it.
for the time and considering.
Thank you. Steve, your arrival was very timely. Welcome along.
Good afternoon all, and thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak to the long-term plan. I'm speaking on behalf of Rugby Southland to the long-term plan outline for Rugby Park. My name's Steve Mitchell and I've been employed as the General Manager for Rugby Southland for just over a year. On arriving in Invercargill just after lockdown lifted in May 2020 with a focus to improve the operation of Rugby Southland both on and off the field. Excuse my puffing, I just marched to get
Straight from training.
Just about. To help Rugby Southland both on and off the field after previously being employed as the operation manager for the Tasman Rugby Union for the previous 6 years. Just a little bit of my background. So during those previous 6 years, Tasman had become arguably the most successful provincial union in New Zealand, both on and off the field. winning the national provincial title twice, building substantial reserves and providing a recognised pathway to the next level opportunities for all of their players. Tasman also led the way with several clever initiatives at community rugby level and hosting the first ever All Black game in Nelson under a new financial model. So it was a fairly exciting time, and a time where I'm proud to be involved and hope to bring that skill set down here. After achieving my personal and the organisational goals at Tasman, I was looking for a new challenge, and helping Southland as a struggling provincial union excited me and was well aligned with my skills and passion, and I was thrilled to be offered the role. Before my employment at Tasman Rugby Union, I was employed as a senior advisor for community sport for Sport Tasman. Whilst in this role, we had a huge focus on the redevelopment and operation of sustainable multi-community facilities. Over 8 years at Sport Tasman, I advised, undertook feasibility studies, governed and facilitated the development of multiple facility projects both locally and across New Zealand. Saxton Field and Nelson is well known for multi-use provision and to international standard. My own home rugby club, the Mighty Rangers from Upper Mootry, had driven the building of Mootry Hills Community Complex, which was recognised by Sport NZ as a template for rural facility development around 2007. And after being a key contributor during the design and building phase, I became the chairman for the first years of operation until the model was proven financially sustainable. 14 years on, Mootry Hills is still providing excellent opportunities for all of its residents and continues to improve on available activities and the standard of facilities provided. So just to sum that up, rugby and community multi-use facilities are a personal focus area that I've had extensive experience in and often have been at the leading edge in New Zealand. Locally, well, rugby is an important part of the fabric of New Zealand society, and not more so than in a provincial union such as Southland. Rugby is also the highest participation sport in Southland and has a proud and strong history in this region. On arriving in Invercargill, one of my first focuses was to look at the facility provision for rugby in Southland and our flagship team, the Southland Stags. As a successful business and a happy work family, both require a good home. So then we get to Rugby Park. The current situation at Rugby Park is that the Supporters Club, Rugby Southland office and the effective grandstands are stated as unsafe. The Supporters Club can enter at their own risk, and signage is to be displayed stating the same. The Rugby Southland offices were completely stripped of wall and ceiling panels last June, and the water egress continues to be an issue. The concrete wall where the water is gaining access has deteriorated further, as has some of the steel work. No further work has been undertaken in the offices since they were stripped of their linings some 9 or 10 months ago. The Board of Rugby Southland have stated that no staff, players or visiting teams can access these areas until they are deemed safe, and council inform us so. Senior staff at Rugby Southland inform me that I'm the third general manager from Rugby Southland who's spent time and energy towards driving a solution at Rugby Park, only to have nothing actioned. The staff are despondent and do not believe that their concerns and well-being are being fairly considered. The current unsatisfactory situation for Rugby Southland community and administration staff are they are housed in the discarded netball pavilion, established as a temporary measure, which is now heading towards its third year. The checkered history resulting in the current state of Rugby Park is well documented and understood by most here. The water egress issues were originally identified at the completion of the building, revisited in 2015 and 2019. It's extremely disappointing for everyone that no remedial action has been implemented to this date. It will serve no purpose to outline the history that caused the ongoing issues at the Rugby Park, but the lack of progress in program maintenance continues to have a detrimental effect on the usage and condition of the facilities. The independent report to council outlines that undertaking remedial work at Rugby Park is the best option towards ongoing provision of an outdoor stadium for Southland for the next 15 to 20 years. What I would propose is a solution that involves effective collaboration and a common goal based on mutual understanding. Regardless of which plan we choose to follow, it will require a combined vision of an effective outdoor stadium, regularly used by multiple user groups from the wider community, with anchor tenants in place and catered for effectively. This is imperative at this stage if we're to improve the current situation and align with modern stadium management concepts. Rugby Southland supports stage 1 of the council long-term plan, making the facility structurally safe and completing the deferred maintenance. This should be implemented as soon as possible. We would voice our concerns over the current proposed timeframe. It is imperative that Rugby Southland staff secure suitable offices in the immediate future. Staff wellbeing, productivity and morale are negatively affected by the current situation, and we need a solution or definite plan now. If there can be no guarantee that the remedial and program maintenance can be implemented before the 2022 Bunnings MPC, Rugby Southland staff will be prepared to move back to the stadium and utilise the corporate boxes and other rooms deemed safe until the required repairs are completed. This concept was first implemented when the toxic mould issue was first identified and only came to an end when the Mitre 10 Cup competition started in 2019. We are currently contributing lease and power costs for this facility while we're not on site. In discussions with senior staff, they would prefer to be housed this way rather than the current situation, and this concept can be actioned immediately without major costs. Staff will be prepared to work around game day requirements as needed, and we still get back to our historic home. Running these requirements for the stag representative season will be easier to implement and much less disruptive for the staff if we are on site at Rugby Park. I call that Plan A. If the timeline of the deferred maintenance and repairs to the building are not able to be implemented in 2024-25, then we need another plan. The staff can't stay where they are. For Plan B, I suggest that we consider an option to place temporary relocatable buildings on site to act as Rugby Southland offices, saving ratepayer money for the rent that council having to pay currently and getting the Rugby Southland team back on site as soon as possible. The capital investment should hold value until the building is no longer required. This will be once the stadium repairs are completed and allow for the use of the office, supporters, club and grandstand safely. Any of the two preferred options outlined should be considered stage 1. As a lead into stage 2, which I consider further development of the park, I request that council consider the establishment of a specific committee made up of operations and governance from both user groups and council to work on a strategic reset of the park towards multi-use so it benefits the wider community and becomes an asset. That the potential of external funding is considered as a collective, and an MOU is drafted between Rugby Southland and ICC to engage and work towards a redevelopment plan for the whole stadium that could be completed in further stages. This concept is requested to commence in the first year of the long-term plan and would involve revisiting the current ownership of the facility, as the current trust clearly has no money and limited capability to maintain the facility. Currently, council funds are allocated to the management and upkeep of Rugby Park, $250,000 per annum. $150,000 is distributed to Invercargill event management and $100,000 to the Invercargill CCT, Charitable Community Trust, is that correct? And $300,000 per 4 years for program maintenance. It's hard to see the benefits of this allocation, and with only $23,000 of the $300,000 allocated towards maintenance utilised, it's easy to understand the current state of the building. But it also raises questions over who's responsible and what work's being undertaken. Rugby Southland have experienced ground maintenance, event management and marketing staff who all hold a vested interest in the presentation and care of Rugby Park and who are willing to work collaboratively to ensure the ongoing success and sustainability of this facility. I am personally willing to use my experience and contacts within the wider rugby community to assist with the project as a component of my current role, improving rugby provision in Southland. The rugby community unanimously want Rugby Southland back at Rugby Park and are willing to help. We have skills, vested interest and the capability to assist council on the journey to develop and manage an effective outdoor stadium for the benefit of the wider Southland community. Once again, thank you for the opportunity and thank you for considering my views. I'm willing and able to answer any questions.
Thanks, Steve. If only we hadn't gone to 10 minutes.
Sorry.
Is it a quickie?
It's a very quick question.
Excellent.
I note that the plan A and B that you have in your paper that you've read out is not in the information you've provided to us in your submission. Are you able to provide a copy of that to
Most
us,
definitely.
please?
Certainly.
Excellent. Thank you. Thanks, Steve. We appreciate that and look forward to receiving that so that we can include that as a part of your submission. Councillors, that brings us to a quick 10-minute break. Please, we've got Mr. Harper here ready. He's scheduled to be presenting to us at 20 to 4, and I want to be underway then. Thank you. We're adjourned. And I'll reconvene the hearing. Wayne, not unfamiliar circumstances for you in this room. Welcome along. Thank you for your submission. You're used to the process, so the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, my submission is predominantly around the...
Wayne, could you just make sure you direct that microphone over? That's it. Cool. Thank you.
Thank you. My business submission is predominantly around the museum and art gallery and the financial prudence thereof with the upgrade that's been proposed. And I don't expect anybody to understand building costs or building techniques, et cetera, but I think we should be using some sort of touchstones to work out what the costs are involved in these. So I use a program called QV Cost Builder, which is used in our industry which develops out costs of facilities, and under the current Cost Builder, art galleries, museums, up to 2 stories with galleries, work areas, small office amenities, HVAC, sprinklers, slow lifts, security and high-level finishes are stated at around $4,500 a square metre. And the money that's been proposed to spend at the current museum is over $10,000 a square metre. And I just can't get my head around why we're spending that much money on that to get a building which is still only 67% of the standard. So from a financial prudence, from a etc., I do question the decision making around going down that path. Also, then align that back to your comments around play to stay, etc., around the CBD and the amount of money that's been spent in the CBD area, and which further encourages me to think that we should be looking at spending that sort of money in the CBD to align with your play to stay philosophies. So that's the basis of where again, that's I'm looking for more from a financial side. I know you've got to weigh up community expectations and those other sorts of things as well, but I think that I just wanted to highlight those sorts of figures. The other side of that, as well as the funding of that, the other part of my submission is around the Invercargill City Council, I believe, pays and the Invercargill City ratepayers as such, pays an exorbitantly high percentage for the regional facilities compared to the rest of Southland. And if we go right across the rest of the country into Otago, into Wellington, etc., they use the regional councils to help those funding mechanisms to spread that load. And as further obviously got out, so when they built the Forsyth Bar Stadium, people as far away as Queenstown paid. They didn't pay as much as a Dunedin person, but they still paid a percentage. And I think the Invercargill ratepayer is continually dipping into its pocket for rugby park, for stadiums, for velodromes, swimming pools, and now with the Museum and Art Gallery as well, seems that it's the Southland Museum and Art Gallery, but it's now basically fully funded by Invercargill. I was a member of the Southland Museum Ratepayer, Southland Museum and Art Gallery board, and at that time. No, it was represented by Gore and by Southland and the others, and now none of that's the case. The big dollar's going to be spent, and the Invercargill ratepayer is the one that's going to dip into the pocket for that. So no matter where it gets built, we've got a regional council here, which is gifted a very large asset in Southport. It uses that, in my opinion, it uses that asset to subsidise rates rather than supporting the wider community. And I think that this council should be spending a lot of time to lobbying that group and pressuring them, to be honest, into picking up some of the mantle on the regional facilities. I'm an avid follower of sport around the area, and we go to rugby park or to the stadium. Very large percentages of people of the clientele are from out of Invercargill. And I know I've seen one report on the netball crowds, and I think 54% of the crowd at netball is from out of Invercargill. Yet it's the Invercargill ratepayer which is footing a lot of that cost. So yeah, that's the basis of my submission, and we'll take questions.
Thanks, Wayne. I don't disagree with your position around regional facilities. Are you considering making a submission to Environment Southland's long-term plan, which has just gone out for consultation as well? I understand you're asking us to lobby them vigorously, but
I hadn't considered it. In fact, I considered today my retirement from politics totally, but I will consider that last hurrah.
Thanks, Wayne. Councillor Clark.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Wayne, just putting aside the issue of the 4,500 versus the 10, which I accept, and that's something certainly that I'll take into consideration. Just want your view on location. I know you've previously declared Lower S Street, but are there other options that you think away from Queen's Park, or should Queen's Park be, or Garner Street be the preferred location if there was to be a new build?
My rationale around Lower S Street is a museum, in my mind, is around researching, looking at your history, doing those sorts of things. And to me, that precinct, when you've got the library next door, you've got the archives next door, you've got those other facilities. To me, it becomes to me a community of interest around that. And I think that I'm not anti the Queen's Park facility, and I think it can be used for something, whether it's an art gallery or something else. But I don't think it's the best place for a museum, because I think people come in. Also, with the amount of money that's been spent in the CBD and trying to enhance that with the car parking that's going to be in there, which will be quite significant, and the fact that when people go to the museum, they can split up. Families can split up. The young ones can go one way, and the parents can go another, and you can get that. So to me, it's that community of interest around those other facilities, and they're very close by. When I was on council previously, we used to get a lot of reports on the museum and Art Gallery about the foot traffic and the people going through the clicker at the door, but they never put the clicker was always at the door where the eyesight was. Yeah. They never ever wanted to put the clicker on the door into the museum, because and it was known very widely that the bulk of the people were going to the eyesight, and again, that's another part of my Lower S Street proposal, is that the eyesight as a natural thing can be fit there. It can be fitted in there perfectly with the Rockner Place toilets as the entrance into the museum art gallery. It's to me, it's the perfect lynch. You can get buses coming into that area. The buses are actually right in the CBD. You've got the hotels, you've got the new Langlands going out, get all those. To me, it's just, again, it fits into the plan. And I know there's a lot of emotion around the museum where it is, but you got to weigh up emotion with practicality and with financial. And it's a hard, I don't envy you, it's a hard choice. But I just want to, I just don't feel comfortable not advocating for it.
Thank you for that.
Thanks. Wayne, if I can ask a question around the $10,000 per metre square, is it possible that price includes demolition before construction as well, and exhibition fit out?
It's possible it does confirm some exhibition stuff, and when I made some in the previous by-election, I put some figures out, and I actually added in another quite a contingency for demolition as well. So, but I understand there's demolition's going to happen anyway in Lower S. So again, I didn't factor it as a major issue. But and again, the figures are figures. They're easy to. I'm just all I'm saying is this is what the figures are by that people. And I checked those figures as well when I was going through the process of putting this together. I scanned newspapers and I'd see a museum in Dunedin or a library in Dunedin built of X square metres. I would just extrapolate the cost of the library against the square foot, and the figures were sort of matching out around that 4,500 to 6,500. So that was the.
Thanks, Councillor Pottinger.
Thank you. Just a quick one. Wayne, were you aware of the makeup of that $51 million?
Yes, I was. I took it based on the information by the report that came out. Yeah.
The 26, 8, 6 and 6 and 5. Yeah, you already knew that. Yeah. No.
Councillors, any further questions? If not, thanks very much, Wayne. Sorry with that tricky little bit at the end that I've not made it your swan song, but...
Yeah, just for a finish, I'd just like to pass on a commendation. I submitted here, I think it was last year, about the building consents process. Just like to commend the City Council for the improvements that have been vast, and like to pass on to staff the gratitude from the industry as well for it's a pleasure doing business online rather than the other. So I'm sure it's for your staff as well. So
thanks,
you very
Wayne.
much.
We appreciate that. Vicky. Sorry?
Holly.
Sorry. Oh, yes. Yep. Okay.
Good afternoon, Your Worship, the Mayor, Councillors and Council staff. My name is Holly and I am here to talk what I would like to do for the town playgrounds. I would love a couple of ginormous playgrounds for everyone. And in the neighbourhood, playgrounds need more seats, picnic tables, barbecue seats, picnic tables, maybe a barbecue or two. And a sign that sticks in the ground that says pick up your litter and more rubbish bins. It will hopefully stop the big kids from high school littering. In town I would like to see some places to play and have some quiet spaces in town around H&J Smith and other places in town. This would make me more interested in coming to town. Skate parks. It feels like it is squished in a small space and the big kids come and take over it. My dad doesn't like it and I don't like it either. It would be good to have a really amazing one that has lots of kids that are not taking over it. The Wanaka and Arrowtown ones are amazing. It would be good if it could have seats, picnic tables too. Museum. I would like it to be open where it is, and also what I like is that the cafeteria was bigger so more people can come and visit and have fun. Plants. More plants around Queen's Drive and other spaces that have grass that you need to mow, so you don't have to mow, and so you can have more native trees, birds and plants, and you can explore them and don't mark them up. What I like is that we have the museum open again if we can, and it would be good, and it would be a pleasure if we could get everything done this year or the next year. And I like these plans for the town. Thank you for listening to my submission.
Thank you, Holly, and thank you for making it. Unlike voting, making a submission to the City Council is not something that is restricted around age. So what you have to say is just as important as every other person that we've listened to over yesterday and today. And it's you've thought a lot about it, and you're obviously very passionate about it, and that's really good. Thank you very much for that. Councillors, open for questions if there are any. Councillor Amundsen and then Councillor Skelt.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Holly, I was just wondering, because we can't do everything all at the same time, which of those things that you talked about would be the thing you would like to see happen very first?
It'd be good to get a skate park or the museum open again, with either of those two.
Thank you. Councillor Scalt.
Thank you, through Chair. Thank you, Holly. Fantastic to have the youth represented today. I just wondered about the museum. What are some of the other things that you and your friends might like to see in a new museum? Is that a bit tough?
A little bit, but
Mum might help.
yeah. More fun things to have some more fun on and explore.
So you like interactive things, things where you can push buttons?
Yeah, and maybe
Exciting and moving?
Yeah, and maybe a treasure hunt or something like that.
Wow, treasure hunt. There we
So
go.
like science museum stuff and...
Yeah.
Councillor Crackett.
And is that like Discovery World in Dunedin? Is that what we're thinking?
She did enjoy that.
Yeah. Lots of interactive displays and lots of things to play with, lots of science to learn.
And we miss the treasure hunts that they used to have every school holiday.
Yeah.
That was a real favourite. So we do miss that.
So there is a treasure hunt that starts at Hawakatuia.
Oh, is there?
Yep. Councillors, was there anyone else?
Sorry, do you happen to have been to the Margaret Mahi playground in Christchurch?
No.
No? Okay, thank you.
But yes, that would fit the ginormous playground.
Yeah. Yeah, excellent. Perfect.
Cool. Thank you very much, Holly. We really appreciate the fact you've come along and made a submission this afternoon. And as you could tell, everybody was listening hard to what you had to say. So thank you.
Thank you.
Well done.
Thank you very much.
Mum.
All right, my turn. All right, kia ora tatou. Kia ora, Your Worship the Mayor, councillors and council staff. Ko ia te manga, ko oiti, te awa, no waihope aho, ko Henry toku whānau, ko Vicky toku ingoa. So my name is Vicky Henry and I'm submitting as a resident and as a proud mum. Thanks for the opportunity to talk about the long-term plan. There's a whole lot of good stuff in there. The roadmap to renewal looks really good, and without taking away from that, there's a few points that I want to raise. The Arts and Creativity Project, I'd love to see that pulled forward, as that will see a difference from other cities, and we've got quite a wealth of talent down here that can be featured. I echo Holly's thoughts on play spaces and the CBD and welcoming families into it. And another ginormous playground and a skate park like Wanaka would be fantastic. We'd even sort of talked about it being in the Queen's Park area on the corner of Gala and Queen's Drive, where people go past it all the time, and that's one of the keys for skate parks, is that it's very public, very open, lots of people just happening to go past. You know, and we talked about bike tracks and bike pump tracks and stuff like that. But my biggest focus for the long-term plan is really the lack of a clear climate change policy. I believe you've heard that a little bit over the last couple of days, Emily mentioned. I note that it's mentioned as part of your key activities, but it seems to be in context of managing council assets. There's a mention of having a plan within the next 3 years while working alongside Environment Southland, but I see this as planning to have a plan. We've got until 2030 to limit global temperature increase to 1.5 degrees to avoid the worst impacts of climate change, but we're reaching those tipping points earlier and earlier. As signatories of the local government New Zealand Climate Change Declaration in 2017, I'm sure this isn't news to any of you. But to not have a plan or policy in place by now with the knowledge that we've got and the risk that we face is, I don't know what that is. Climate change is referred to in many of the action plans under the long-term plan. I had a good dig around and a look, but mainly again it's in terms of asset protection and mitigating the effect on council activities. But there doesn't seem to be any clear plan to mitigate the impact of council activities on the climate. No clear goals, objectives, allocated resources or measurement of emissions. If climate change is the number one issue Kiwis are worried about, and it's mentioned within council reports and action plans, then why isn't there a policy? It's too big an issue not to have clear pathways forward on by now. Auckland City Council, long-term plan 21 to 2031, halving greenhouse gas emissions by 2030, carbon neutral 2050. Christchurch City Council have changed their carbon neutral goal from 2050 to 2030. Dunedin's net zero carbon goal by 2030, and Wellington and Nelson have comprehensive plans to reduce emissions. And we're planning to have a plan. There have been attempts to introduce new targets and measures within some of the action plans. I had a good look, but without a clear overarching policy, these are going to be piecemeal and somewhat tokenistic. We need clear science-based policy plans with budgets and ambitious timeframes. Let's write the policy, let's make these goals, let's set the targets, and then let's get on with it at speed. We can be the city with the most street trees in the world. Let's think bigger than if a new development needs a few more trees, then we're going to have to remove them from elsewhere, which is written into the action plan under the parks and reserves, because we want to avoid ongoing costs. This is not the right thinking. Let our tree plan, we've got one evidently, I couldn't find it. Let the tree plan say there's no limits on the number of trees. Let's protect what we've got and plant a whole lot more. It's one of the simplest and best actions we can take to address climate change. We can be the city in the world with the least places to mow. Let's think bigger than planning to increase our mown hectares, which is again in an action plan. Let's plant the median strips. Let's plant the berms and the verges with height appropriate natives and create biodiversity corridors throughout our city and surrounds. Less mowing, less pollution, less spraying, and we get more wildlife, more rare and endangered plant support, and improved carbon sequestering. We can be the first city in the world to have no coal-fired boilers. This is a hugely impactful step to lower our carbon emissions, and it supports local businesses such as Falls, who are leaders in this field. And I know there's a background project with the wood burning around town. There's been an amazing amount of positive collaborative work going into the carbon neutral Southland project. It's a powerful project and it shows that the future is very positive. So let's stop planning to have a plan and get on with it. It doesn't need to be hard. All the information's out there. We can just pick and choose the actions to suit us. Imagine if we invested in real actions against climate change. Electric buses, electric vehicles for council, passive house quality housing for council housing options, better outcomes for the residents, lower emissions by 90% over the building's lifetime. Water fountains everywhere, so no more bottled water, bike racks, cycle and walkways, restoration planting along flood banks and streams, and this is just a start. Please lead the way. Please stop planning to have a plan and make an actual plan. Please value our environment for more than what it can give you. Think of it as a balance sheet. We have to even it up. You are in such a great position to make real significant difference. Please don't waste this opportunity. Our time is running out. I don't want to be here doing this. I don't enjoy this. I don't want to be doing this in 21. I want to be inspired by you and your plan. Let the next long-term plan submission from me read, nothing further to add. I know I'm over time, but may I finish on a quote?
You're not over time.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's what the ding-dong was.
That was the halfway point.
Oh, cool. So I'll finish on a quote from my verbal submission that I gave. Actually, if I'm not out of time, I'll just go back to one point I skipped. A very senior council staffer at a retailers meeting at the beginning of consultation on City Block told us that Southlanders don't care about the environment because we have the highest number of gas guzzling cars in the world. But I think they are wrong. Southlanders love their environment. We love getting out amongst it, and we're concerned about habitat loss, about pest species, about overfishing, clean water, wilding pines, and we're scared about climate change. So to finish, I quoted in my verbal submission for the investment in City Block in July 2019. Cities around the world are looking at sustainability, and this should be the guiding principle of every council initiative. I have a 7-year-old, sorry, now nearly 9. Her life at 17 will be very different from our experience, and I will do everything I can at every opportunity to change this outcome for her. I want her to have a future where water isn't scarce, weather isn't extreme, and sea levels haven't risen. Climate change is written, briefly, into our long-term plan. It is in every insurance policy. It should be informing our planning. Every action counts, every decision counts. In 30 years, when we look back on the decisions we make today, let's be on that right side of history, moving with our time, not the last of the old dragging our feet. Let's be seen to be doing all we could, when we could, for our children's future and for my daughter's future. Thank you.
Thank you, Vicky. Councillor Pottinger.
Look, climate change. This is a question around the ethics of climate change, and talk about electric vehicles, solar panels. Do you think it right that council or anyone should buy those products, EVs or panels, from a factory that uses coal-powered electricity?
I think that's quite a loaded question.
No, but I'm just saying the ethics. It's to do with ethics. We have ethics with our recycling.
Yeah.
We can't send our
sure.
recycling somewhere that...
I think that in today's world, it's really hard to make a decision without falling over ethics everywhere. So I understand.
No, but
your
if
point.
they're burning coal to make those cars,
Are they burning coal to make
the
petrol?
electricity.
Are they burning coal to make petrol cars?
No, burning coal to make electricity. I'm just saying, is that fair? Is that ethics okay? I just want to know what the rules are. You know, when we start, where do you draw the line?
Well, I think we have to make some choices, don't we? So electric vehicles have lower emissions, and then we have to then do our due diligence into how they're made, and also our due diligence into where does our power come from. So down here we have quite good
No,
sun.
I'm talking about overseas where the cars are made, yeah.
Yep. So and then my question comes back to you is, well, is there a difference between how petrol cars are made and how electric cars are made regarding coal burning to make the cars?
Okay.
Because then it's a moot point.
No, that's okay. That's given me the answer I wanted. Thank you.
Thanks, Vicky. Other questions, councillors? There are none. Thank you very much for coming along this afternoon. We'll let the proud mum leave the table and be equally proud of yourself for your submission too. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Colin. Welcome along, Colin.
Thank you, Darren.
We've got a submission on the list.
Your Worship, the Mayor and councillors, thank you for the opportunity to speak.
It's not on the list.
I'm known to some of the councillors, but I've lived in Invercargill since 1969. I taught in a number of schools and finished my teaching career as principal of St George School, which is now Fernworth, in 2004. In 2007, I started work at the Southern Museum and Art Gallery as coordinator of visitor and education services, with responsibility for about half the staff. I have a very good understanding of all aspects of the museum. In 2007, it was an exciting time, and one of the reasons for accepting the job was the prospect of being involved in the proposed redevelopment. Sadly, of course, for a number of reasons, this never happened. I retired from the museum after 5 years in 2012. Firstly, may I say I'm probably wasting my time, as it appears the decision on the future of the museum has already been made. Collection items are already being packed up, ready for going into storage, somewhere unknown, no doubt at a high cost, to enable work on the building to start. I believe the process is flawed, and the options presented in the consultation document are not in the best interests of our city and province. In the case of the museum, it's not a roadmap for renewal, it's a roadmap to 67% of renewal, which is not good enough. The ILT can demolish inner city buildings and build a 7-storey, 4.5-star hotel for $40 million. But this council was planning to spend $52.5 million on a patch-up job to bring a substandard building up to 67% of new building standards, Where's the logic in that? It just doesn't make sense. The current building has grown from the original 1940s building, with each remodel being attached to the previous structures, and this has affected the flow of the building as well as the structural integrity of the building. Something to clarify, the current building is not a pyramid. It's a steeply pitched roof supported on the external walls and internal columns. The roof has some design limitations, and it leaked from day one. There's nothing that has been released to the public that generates any excitement. Just fixing up an old building so that it can be reopened. Build a new one alongside and keep the current building for storage. A new building could create some excitement and enthusiasm. Museums don't have to be boring with glass cases of old stuff. We've had a glimpse of what can be achieved with the World War I exhibit. There are some fantastic options available. A glass floor over a relief map of Southland, enabling visitors to walk around Southland. Glassed off storage areas where items can be glimpsed, along with watching conservators and staff at work. At the moment, the amount of stuff in storage is never seen by the public. Technology such as large screens, live streaming our weather. If you can't fix it, feature it. A virtual aquarium with cameras streaming our incredible sea life, or a saltwater aquarium. Workshops featuring conservatives working on the collection. Maybe even a commercial repair shop like the one on TV. An artist in residence working. Traditional skills with carving, weaving, arts being created. Partnerships with DOC, SIT, Fish and Game and conservation groups to highlight their work. Research facilities. Things happening, not just static displays. From what I've seen so far that's been released by the council, all they're planning to do is fix the old building. An education centre, a good sized theatre to attract visiting experts, and of course a great cafe opening onto Queen's Park. There are exciting examples in museums around the world, as well as unleashing the creative talents of our locals. If you want to attract funders, where would you put your money? Fixing up an old building or being part of an innovative new development? Much of the preliminary work for a new museum has already been done. Check out the storage area. There's a lovely model of a new design in a glass case. It's the upside down pyramid one. Sadly rejected, but with a few tweaks, it could form the basis of a new building. Please don't squander our money. The figures I've forwarded in my submission for building a new museum do stack up. I've had the figures checked by an independent engineer, and he stated that they would certainly be in the ballpark for a new development. Does the council even need to own a museum? After all, it's only recently established that the council did own the building. Look at inner city developments. Do Kmart, the warehouse or farmers own their buildings? Is there an opportunity for someone else to build a new museum for the council to lease? I'm sure there are options there where it ends up as a lease to eventually own the building, and it spreads the costs over a number of years. If you're hell-bent on keeping the current building, maybe sell it for a nominal amount, get someone else to bring it up to standard and lease it as a storage option. A lease option could speed up the whole process, and with a well-crafted lease, it could be a win-win situation for our province. Don't shortchange our city. After the disappointment of the closure of the museum, we need a project to uplift and inspire. Go on, dream big. That's my submission.
Thanks, Colin. Councillor Abbott.
Yeah, thank you for that. I haven't got the figures that you suggested for a new build. Could you tell me what they are?
I'm relying on the figures for that Wayne Harper provided,
Oh, okay.
which is about $6,000 per square metre.
Thanks for that. Okay, that's the paper given to you.
Councillor Amundsen.
Thanks, Councillor Ludlow. My question is, so there's been a lot of concern that it's taken a long time to get started on the redevelopment of the museum, especially after the closure. And so lots of people have said in their submissions that we need to get on with it and we need to get on with it ASAP. And they want it open sooner rather than later. So what would you say to those people if we were to decide to go down the road of building a new museum either on the same site or in a different place, which is possibly going to take a wee bit longer?
I wonder, how long did it take for the Kmart building to be built? Anyone got an idea? It's probably about the size we would need for a museum.
It's a cut and paste, isn't it?
It's a warehouse, Colin. I don't think
It is
it's
a warehouse, but basically the structure, it's got an underground park, it's got, and I appreciate there's a lot of other bits and pieces in there. How long is it going to take the City Council to build their hotel?
We're not building a hotel.
The license-
ILT.
Sorry.
So their construction period, 3 years, but 5 years of planning before it.
A lot of the planning has already been done, hasn't it?
No.
Particularly on grounds and some work for the initial upside down pyramid.
There's been a lot of preliminary work done, yes, but we don't know what's... That was version 1, Councillor Crackett. It was an inverted pyramid on the same site.
Was that when I was a toddler?
It wasn't all that long
If you're 8 years old, yes.
In answer to your question, Rebecca, I don't know. I'm not a construction engineer or anything like that. But answering the question, if a new museum could be shown to have some exciting things in it, I'm sure people wouldn't mind waiting. In Dunedin, they waited while the Settlers Museum was redeveloped. And if the project is exciting enough, people don't mind waiting. I think they'll be disappointed at just a reopened old building.
Further questions? Seemingly there are none. Colin, thank you very much for taking the time to make the submission and for coming along to present. Councillors, my apologies for not pointing out it was the written version that was on their tables.
Thank you, Colin. It was handed out yesterday.
They just come, they just stealthy in the mountain, they never make a song and dance about it, you don't ever get
Mr. Templar isn't presenting, but we
Isn't for us.
isn't. Mr. Downing. Good timing, sir.
Mr. Downing.
Statement. So is he?
Yeah.
We need to bring it up here.
Crickets.
Make a decision.
Who's this?
It's cricket.
Cricket.
They told us nothing about that.
Cricket. We got a cricket ground.
Huh? Yeah, there's a lot of water on it.
Well, these left or their left. Oh, yeah. Water polo.
Bring it there.
Background extra for black. Oh, I mean the pit.
You know, it's already
It's already in there. It's already in the old museum. It's already there. It's got to be in there. It's all there. It doesn't matter, you don't have to do anything with this. All the matters match you do when it's done. Put a storage facility. It becomes a storage facility. Perfect. See?
Quite comprehensive.
Better wait for the umpire.
Stop it.
Around 2015, Councillor Crackett, 2014, 2015. So I'll let you do the maths on your age at that stage.
2009, inverted pyramid.
Sorry, I was looking at an article from the paper in 2015. For me, it's a blur.
Google 2009, innovative new vision for museum.
There you go. Even younger.
Could have
Right.
Could have got it for 24 million.
Back to cricket. We don't like cricket. We love it. 10cc. Thank you very much for taking the time to come along and present to us this afternoon, gentlemen. The floor is yours.
Tēnā koutou, tēnā ahi ahi, good afternoon all. This is Peter Dowling, our Acting General Manager of Southland Cricket Association, and I'm Jerry Ward, the Chairperson of the Southland Cricket Association. The Southland Cricket Association would like to make an application to the city's 2021-31 long-term plan in regards to maintenance and upgrade of the Queen's Park Cricket Ground. Southland is considered a minor association, falling under the strategic decision-making. Decision-making.
You can have a seat if you prefer, Jerry.
Well, off the bigger district, Otago, and whoever gets final hearsay being New Zealand Cricket. As a minor association, we have an extremely proud record, not just in our playing results, but also in the pathway that we have created for staff who have developed their craft with us and progressed to much higher honours both within New Zealand and overseas. Our junior participation numbers across the city and wider province have been outstanding and never been better. The future looks promising, and as an association we've been able to accommodate the COVID crisis and still deliver a quality experience for our stakeholders. The jewel in our crown is the Queen's Park venue, beautifully anchoring the south end of the Queen's Park Gardens, an outstanding pavilion, an indoor training centre, a wicket block, which is the actual playing surface, and I'll be talking a lot about grounds, which has an excellent rating, an aesthetic environment regarded by many players who come here to be amongst the best in the minor associations in the country. But despite what you see, under the surface, we have a problem. Around 2013-14, I recall presenting here detailing the need for urgent drainage to the grounds as we had lost our first-class warrant of fitness, and we wanted this restored. What this means is that we're not able to host Otago representative games. That's with the Volts, the men's, or the Sparks, who are the women's team. We can't actually host any cricket higher than club cricket or representative age grade cricket. Back at that time, the council allocated $100,000 over 2 years to redrain the ground, and this was extremely successful. And all stakeholders are forever grateful for the amount of work and funding that was provided to this. There is a handout amongst your notes that just show lots of lines on a piece of paper, which are the drains themselves. So they're 10 metres apart. There was 13 lateral drains put in, running from the Garter Street end of Queen's Park down towards the north end, and that's commonly known and be referred to as the duck pond end. This works extremely well, but has created a problem in that it pushes too much water from the northern end into the lower duck pond end, and it's not getting away quick enough, creating a large slushy area beneath the sight screens and causing New Zealand Cricket, who completed an audit on the ground during the recent Otago-Auckland game, to withdraw any further first-class cricket from the city. This was the primary recommendation in their report. Another two I will inform you of shortly. This ponding of the water can be rectified through several methods, and already the Parks and Reserves, principally Chris McCauley, have worked really hard on trying to find some solutions to this. They believe the area needs to have some of the trees removed behind the sight screen, particularly in a large hedge that needs to be trimmed back to enable wind to get through there and more sunlight to access the damaged area. Ironically, just looking there 20 minutes ago, there's more sunlight there than all season because the leaves are off all those large trees. The root system has also damaged some of the drainage along that south end of Queen's Park. The drain itself, the big drain that has to take all the water away, runs back across in front of the indoor practice area, and it simply can't cope or manage that water flow. And if anything, it's largely because the soil is around the pipes rather than clean gravel, which a lot more clean gravel is required in there. And also the size of the dispensing pipe. Unfortunately, in the lead up to the recent Auckland Otago game, and including the game, we had 6 out of 7 days of rain, which didn't help us or our reputation a lot, but it happens in cricket, as you know. And it caused that game to be finished early without a satisfactory result, and quite a lot of complaint from the associations, not so much from the players, but those that were administrating the game beyond Southland. It also made the Southland Times headlines. It also made the Otago Times headlines later in the month when the editor there got a copy of the review report written by New Zealand Cricket. New Zealand Cricket aren't satisfied with it and are going to come down and meet with us on the 26th of this month to discuss how we solve this problem and what we can do going forward. They're not asking for it to be solved immediately, but they do want some action, is what we're hearing. So the drainage is about 80% right and about 20% wrong. When I last presented here, it was the other way around, and we certainly are grateful because it does work. A second concern for the New Zealand Cricket audit was around the need for those lateral drains I'm referring to be levelled out, and unfortunately with the 13 of them, they're sinking, as you would with any drain. They've all sort of dropped about an inch, 2.5 centimetres over that 6-year period. Water does collect on them while it's waiting to be drained, but it becomes unsafe for a ball to be fielded when it's coming across a ground that looks a bit like Fobo Strait on a good day, which is full of ripples, and it can cause the ball to bounce dangerously in front of a player, or it can cause players to roll ankles and things. And there has been complaints from players around that, and certainly in the New Zealand Cricket report. We had also furnished a report with ground specialists to see what was required at the ground, and those two things that I've talked about were pretty evident, and I think the highlights or the summary of those reports is included in your notes around what's required. We do believe that this is more minor works than capital investment, but essentially restoring our city's venue to a first-class status is essential for our residents who enjoy quality sport, and we don't want to take that away from them. A third concern raised was the quality of the electronic scoreboard, and this was a requirement also of hosting first-class matches. We had one, and for a long time it worked perfectly well, but we've been unable to use it due to it rusting out, an inability to find parts for it or anyone who can fix it. We've searched the globe and most of China as well, looking for some way of being able to solve that problem, and it can't be done. In recent times, we've hired a smaller electronic scoreboard from Speedy Signs, which is transportable but not meeting the warrant of fitness match conditions. A new electronic board has been quoted by Monster Vision to cost $60,000. We've received $20,000 from the ILT towards this, and we've allocated $20,000 of our own reserves towards this, and we asked the council to consider contributing towards this asset as well. A condition of the warrant of fitness for any match is the score must be clearly seen from any part of the playing ground. We do not see such a board being solely for cricket, and we'd like the ground to have more multi-purpose use. Last year we had the National Pipe Band competition on that ground, and it was a great success. A scoreboard would have helped immensely, an electronic scoreboard would have helped immensely. We could also see the possibility of the City to Surf or the Riverton Marathon finishing in the city, maybe car shows or have-a-go days, those type of things contributing towards its use. It should be an asset for the city. We have 250 young children play there twice a week during the weeknights, and ideally a scoreboard that has draws and venues or the locations for them to play on, and also some visuals of them playing coming up on that board would be great. So in summary, the original drainage that was a strength for the ground and greatly appreciated has become a weakness and needs rectified at the duck pond end only. The same lateral drainage is gradually sinking, causing a ripple effect across the playing surface, and needs topping up annually for the next few years to level the field. And that's just a sand and topsoil composite, probably just putting on an inch each year and letting it work into the ground. It's unsafe at the moment. And unless we rectify the scoreboard situation, which is an expensive asset, we won't get our warrant of fitness back. So thank you very much for listening and considering our needs, and Peter and myself are open to any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Jerry. So with the 20,000 gap for a scoreboard and the groundworks, what kind of amount are we talking about?
Well, I can probably answer that more.
Can you swing that microphone around?
I guess the groundworks is something that the ICC, the parks, have been looking at. So we don't have the exact figures, but they certainly quoted to us remove the trees was around $15,000. The drains, which was the next major thing, is probably a similar figure to take the top dirt off the ring drain. So probably, and then the 20,000 for the scoreboard. A lot of the other work is just increasing what they're doing round. It's not a financial cost, it's just a little bit extra work for top dressing.
Councillor Soper.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to inquire, have you looked at the criteria for applications to Council's Active Community Fund?
This happened in the last week of March, and we were given the hurry up by New Zealand Cricket immediately after that game, and Peter came to the ICC here and was told to very quickly submit an application, Soper. So in many ways we haven't analysed it, but we did what was asked of us to get something into you. I think they were due on the 9th of May or somewhat.
So you have made an application to Active Communities?
Not to Active Communities, no.
You're referring to this application?
But there might be funding in Active Communities.
Can I suggest you might want to look at the criteria for the Active Community Fund?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillors, any further questions? Councillor Skelt.
To you, Chair, just the scoreboard, mobile scoreboard? Mobile?
Cryer Scout, I'd love a mobile scoreboard, and we've looked at that with Monster Vision. I've also gone to Otago and asked why they spent $100,000 on one at their ground and didn't make it mobile for Montague Park and ourselves in North Otago. They don't travel well, is the understanding. Personally, though, I'd love to see one for the whole city that could be managed by someone that goes to, and it could be used for all those events. I just named it Tiratonga and Southland Athletics and everything else that we run across town. I think it'd be a great asset, really, but they have to be very carefully managed, is our understanding. Yeah.
So that was the lead.
Not at $60,000 though, Nigel.
That's okay, but in the sense of even if it was permanently parked there, if the council was to become a partner with you, the opportunity of putting advertorials on it as a business model, that would work for you guys?
Being a partner would interest us, and being a principal investor in it would probably want those dates that we need. I wouldn't store it at Southland Cricket. I think it needs to be in a warehouse, and I understand from its use there's a wee bit of technical skill. Someone needs to know how to manage them and set them up. But I think personally the city would benefit. Imagine Burt Munro with a large screen and those types of things. It'd be really good for the city.
Yes, I was thinking around the event promotion from the city's perspective as well.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
Just looking along the opportunity, if Southland Cricket was amenable to that.
And we'd certainly contribute back to it. Bearing in mind, probably the licensing trust would be a part of it, but they've already given us $20,000, which we've hidden in reserves. Yep.
Stored.
Still there. Yeah, oh yeah, still there.
Thanks, Jerry. Any further questions? If not, Jerry, Peter, thank you very much for your submission, which was in on time, and for coming along this afternoon to speak to it.
Thank you very much. Good evening.
Yep.
Courtney. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, all the attachments referred to are in these folders. I'm not sure if we just leave them for you to.
Yep, we'll take them from you.
Thank you.
This time, welcome along, Courtney.
Thank you. Kia ora. Thank you for having me. Am I right?
Yeah, the floor is yours. You've got 10 minutes. We'll ring a bell at 5. That you don't have to stop then. But if you get to the second bell, we run out of question time.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. I'm sure I won't be that long. Kia ora, everyone. My name is Courtney Ellison, and I'm the Community Development and Operations Manager at South Alive. And I'm just here to talk to South Alive's submission on your long-term plan. So thank you for the opportunity. Really, we just wanted to submit at a high level to just keep that awareness and continue to advocate for the equitable investment across the city and the infrastructure that the City Council manages. The roadmap to renewal document is obviously quite focused on the city centre and a few other scattered projects. We understand that that's a focus for the council, but we just want to continue to advocate for the rest of the suburbs, in particular South Invercargill, and to ensure that there is ongoing investment put into that area. I've just highlighted in our submission a few examples of the things that we hear as part of my role and as part of what South Alive does. We engage with our community a lot to hear what it is that they want for their community and what they want to see for South Invercargill. And something that comes up frequently are improvements to Russell Square, in particular a fence around the playground area to keep it safer for kids. I've got 2 young kids myself, and I know the very real speed with which kids can move, and that playground is so close to such a busy road, and so many parents have raised that with us when we've had annual surveys, public meetings. Just recently at the Pantry Village Market, I had a stand there where I was just wanting to hear what people loved about South Invercargill, so I was having a bit of engagement opportunity there, and people raised it again there, that it's a real safety concern for kids using that playground. Also, through all of that engagement, one of the other things that is raised is the need for public toilets at that park, and there's also been concerns raised about the trees creating slip hazards and safety concerns along that road too. So that's just the kind of example of the investment and continued interest we want to see in the South Invercargill area. Another example is around the footpaths. We have a lot of elderly people coming through and using our space at the pod. And one of the things we hear about is the accessibility of different areas. One thing that was raised by our senior friendship group was that it would be great to know where all the accessible sort of paths are. A lot of them they may not be in wheelchairs, but they may use walkers, and just even the accessibility of where they could go for walks with their walkers and have those smooth surfaces. I made some inquiries and was given a brochure that was maybe 15 years old that had a few accessible footpaths. Thompson's Bush and Anderson's House Loop were the ones that were given as examples, and neither of those actually that user-friendly for people with walkers. So just some consideration to that when infrastructure is being developed, and perhaps it's just around promotion of areas that are of that better standard. So those are just some of the examples of the infrastructure and attention that we'd like to see continued in the South Invercargill area. On a more positive note, we also wanted to acknowledge and submit in support of the proposed changes to the rating system that will see the lower valued properties contributing a lower proportion of the rates. And yeah, I've included in our submission some of the South Invercargill deprivation measures, which just highlights the importance that taking that approach really means to our community. You can see that the deprivation score for almost all of the suburbs within the South Invercargill area is in that high deprivation area, so a score of 8, 9 or 10. There's only one that sits outside of that, and that's Newfield, and that's at a level 7 on the deprivation index from 1 to 10. So that's some pretty high deprivation measures that we're facing in South Invercargill, and so any way to ease that financial pressure is supported. And finally, I just want to acknowledge and thank the staff and councillors that came out to the pod in South Invercargill as part of your engagement on this process. We really appreciate that you travelled around the area and came to South Invercargill to do some of the engagement on this and made it approachable and accessible for people in our community. So I just wanted to thank you for that as well.
Thanks, Courtney. Can I just ask about the fence you're suggesting for Russell Square?
Mm-hmm.
What size of fence? Because at some point there's going to be a concern around safety and security for people on that playground.
Yeah, so I presume your park staff are probably best equipped to give some advice on what kind of style of fencing, but it's just something to create a barrier so that kids can't just immediately run out. It doesn't even necessarily need to be fully enclosed, but just something to slow a kid.
Not too electric.
Yeah, not electric. No barbed wire, perhaps.
Thanks, Courtney. Councillor Rabbit.
Yeah, I just want to notify that South Alive do sponsor a little program on my radio show every day for community services. There's no pecuniary interest, they're not charged, I get no remuneration, but I just wanted to say I've had no input into these submissions.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Munson.
Thanks, Chair. I'm just wondered if we could ask you about the Saving Grace project and your thoughts around the level of need for a project like that to happen in South Invercargill. Would it support the work that you're doing?
Yeah, so South Alive Board was involved in doing some of the preliminary work around that Saving Grace project, and our Chair Beryl was involved in doing quite a bit of the youth consultation around the need for that, and certainly the board sees that there is a need for a youth space. All the engagement and research that was done around that identified that need. Yeah. Yeah. So there's definitely the consultation was done with number 10 schools, people that run youth gaming events. There was consultation with a variety of people that are involved in the youth sector, and there was feedback from that was that there was a need for a space for youth. Our board isn't in a financial position necessarily to progress with providing a facility at this point in time. So we're trying to do a lot of other activities in the youth space that provide potential services rather than a facility itself, but a facility of some kind was demonstrated as a need from that research. We'd be happy to share that if needed.
Thank you. Further questions? Lucky escape, Courtney. Thank you very much for your submission and for coming along this afternoon. We do appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Councillors, we've got one final submission. I think it was going to be by Zoom or phone, so we're trying to get in touch with them. Councillor Scout has already advised that he's had to leave. Councillor Crackett also has to. You didn't tell me.
I'm telling you now. Just school or what?
No, it's a much more statutory
Or what?
organisation than school.
Bye-bye.
You're getting a bit ratty there.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman.
It's very rude.
We do rude.
Are we having this? Is this?
We just are we waiting for Basil at 10 or can we contact?
Is he on just on the floor?
On Zoom.
Yep.
I think we probably need to wait till the time.
We can go into Zoom.
Yeah.